I will call to order this meeting of the Board of Selectmen. It is November 13th, 2017. All members of the Board of Selectmen are present this evening. Just a brief note of business is that we are just coming out of an executive session for purpose 7, which was to review and approve executive session minutes in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 22. We adjourned that meeting and retired into open session. Here we are. If I could invite everyone in attendance to rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I was traveling out of state yesterday, and during the morning hours, I got a text message from my friend and colleague, Mr. Bendel, with very sad news about some events that had happened the previous evening. So if I could, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Bendel briefly just to share something with everyone listening and with the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's with a very heavy heart, along with many in the community who are stricken with sadness this evening as we mourn the loss of a Wilmington resident, a beautiful young lady who passed over the weekend. I think it's only fitting that we begin this meeting not only offering thoughts and prayers to her family, but with a moment of silence to remember and pay tribute to Wilmington's own Army Specialist, Ryan Giroux. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bendel. Thank you all. I would jump into item number 3, which is the approval of Treasury Warrant 19 and 19A. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? I hear none. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. And we have one set of minutes from October 10th, 2017. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Motion's made and seconded down the end. Any further discussion on those? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. So, Mr. West, are you available? Are you ready? Where are we having Mr. West and his guest join us? Are they going to, I guess, join us at the front microphone on the left, if that's all right, Frank? Our 7:05 scheduled appointment is with Mr. Frank West and Gunnery Sergeant William Gilliam, I'm sorry. Oh, is this, are you Sergeant Hall?
Yes.
Sorry, we have it incorrect on the agenda here. Sorry, Sergeant Hall, thank you for being here. And gentlemen, you are here to talk to us, as you are each year, about Toys for Tots at this time of the season. So, Frank, I'll turn it over to you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. For the record, Frank West, 2 Birchwood Road in Wilmington. Basically, every year, as you said, Mike, is that we talk for a couple of minutes about the Toys for Tots program, how to get toys, and a little bit about some local activities that are going on. Most importantly, I'd like to introduce Sergeant Ryan Hall. He's a Marine Corps reservist. I stand corrected. He's Marine Corps active duty. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for your service publicly. I appreciate that. As do I thank all of the selectmen and certainly the audience. That said, I'd like to introduce Sergeant Hall to talk a couple of minutes about the Toys for Tots program, and we have a certificate that we'd like to present to the board.
Thank you.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is my first year doing Toys for Tots, so here, I'm going to raise this up a bit. That'll be fine. So I don't have a whole ton of information, but I do know that you can get a lot of the information from toysfortot.org. If you're looking for a specific toy or looking for specific areas to either donate or be able to request from, it's a pretty simple breakdown of, just look for Massachusetts and you can break it down from there for the Middlesex County. If you do donate a toy or someone does donate a toy in Middlesex County or in Wilmington, it's a pretty likely chance that it'll stay in Wilmington, but there is a possibility that it'll go somewhere else. We do have a warehouse in Billerica where everything comes into, and we sort the toys from there based off of gender and age groups and everything like that. And as orders come in, then that's what we fill. There's very few of us that do that each day. I'm going to step back a little bit. There's very few of us that do that because we have a very small detachment. We do get volunteers from different organizations. We've had people from Gillette Stadium come and help, various other organizations. So if volunteers is something that you would like to present to us, that's definitely something we're willing to accept and would gladly take. So that's pretty much all I have if you have any questions or anything like that.
Thank you. Frank, do you want to complement that, or do you want to go right to questions now, or what do you?
I can compliment it, and Sergeant Hall has a certificate that he'd like to present.
Why don't I, if it's all right, I'd like to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to sort of chime in with questions or just comments about the presentation and about Toys for Tots in general. So I'll do that. Greg, looks like you had your hand going, so you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Frank, thank you very much. Appreciate you. Always very active in our community. Once again, thank you for all you do. And Sergeant Hall, thank you, sir, for what you're doing here, and I appreciate your service to our country. If I could ask, where is it you're from, Mr. Hall?
I am originally from Texas.
Texas. Well, and which part of Texas?
North Central, close to Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Well, the folks from there ought to be very proud of you. So,
Thank you.
and appreciate what you're doing here for our community. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Frank, I too want to commend you and thank you for always putting this together. This program is very needed in our community and in others. Sergeant Hall, thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
Very commendable, everything that you do for the citizens of the United States. Frank, do you have a location where people can drop off the
I'll get
toys?
into
Is
that.
that the next
Yeah, I
part?
can get an answer in a moment.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so similar, I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about the specific details from Mr. West about how folks can participate in this process, either by donating toys or if you find yourself in need, reaching out and gaining access to some toys for kids during the holidays. But again, Sergeant Hall, thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you for representing the Marine Corps and Toys for Tots here. We are always moved by you and your fellow members of the Marine Corps who participate in this effort every year. So thank you for your service to our country, but also to Toys for Tots as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thanks. I just want to echo my colleagues. Frank, I want to thank you every year. You always step up to the plate. You always help out with the Toys for Tots. Not only you, your wife does it, your whole family does it. They do a great job with the Minutemen and the Toys for Tots, and that goes without saying. And to you, Sergeant, I really appreciate your involvement. First of all, once again, I want to thank you for your service. That really means a lot to the country and the nation as a whole. And I just want to say thank you, and it really means a lot that you participate in this endeavor, and we can't thank you enough for what you do for our country. We
Thank
truly
you.
mean that. Thank you.
Mr. Lowe?
Thank you. Thank you, Frank, for bringing this to us like you do every year for the last umpteen years, but we really appreciate that. But Sergeant Hall, happy belated birthday. I know the Marines had a birthday Friday on the 10th. And we thank you for your service, not only to the community for Toys for Tots, but for our great nation. Thank you.
Thank you.
He's a lot taller than me. He's from Texas. I'm from Wilmington.
Something in the water.
Basically, a few local things, just so you know, and to address Mr. Kyra, to address your question. What you'll see around town, Karen and I are the zone managers for Wilmington and Tewksbury, and basically around town, you'll see posters like this around. We've got roughly 75 locations between Wilmington and Tewksbury that we handle with toy boxes, toy collection boxes. One actually here at the high school, one at Town Hall, many of the local businesses, Market Basket, Reading Cooperative Bank, several of the other banks in town. There's many businesses as well, Pepsi being one of them, Lubrizon, Wilmington Dance Academy. I could go on. You don't want to hear the whole list, and this is just Wilmington. But I do want to let the residents know that one way to get toys is that if they go into the website, toysfortots.org, they can drop down. There's a drop-down menu that'll say state, county, and then go from there. In that website also is avenues for people to donate toys. A couple of events that I just want to let you know locally that might be an opportunity that somebody, that wants to donate toys and, wants to either donate cash or toys, they can come to our real estate office, West Real Estate, at 386 Main Street. I'll give you a flyer on both of these. But on December 10th, which is a Sunday, I've got 10 professional wrestlers, including some that are television wrestlers, some that are local, from Lucky Pro Wrestling. Hopefully they don't destroy my office. But that being said, for $5, you can get 8x10 photos of every one of the wrestlers. I believe they're offering separate photos. And also on the on Sunday the 16th, got Rick Middleton, nifty number 16 for those who remember Boston Bruins. He's coming to the office as well, and same thing, if somebody brings in cash or a new unwrapped toy, they're welcome to get autographs, pictures. We're actually going to be raffling off a Rick Middleton sweatshirt, and I think we're going to have a few other little raffle things along the way too. So that being said, I'd like to pass these to you, as well as they don't give us a big budget with Toys for Tots because everything goes to the kids, but they have little wristbands that I'd like to hand you also, and more importantly, I'd like to ask Sergeant Hall if he would present a certificate on behalf of the town of Wilmington's involvement on the Toys for Tots program. The last thing I want to say is that you had mentioned about, Ed, you had mentioned about it being the Marine Corps anniversary that just came up recently. This is actually a milestone for the Toys for Tots program, and it's 70, this is the 70th year. It was actually started in 1947, the Toys for Tots program out in California. So I just want to let you know this is their 70th anniversary, and as I'm slowly getting gray, it's our 21st anniversary of working with the program. So just want to let you know that. And also, you gave me some great compliments. I really appreciate that. But more importantly, we put out a bunch of empty boxes. We run a couple of events. But more importantly, it's really the people that actually put the toys in the boxes or give a check to the Toys for Tots Foundation, and certainly Marines such as Sergeant Hall that, not only is he doing his active duty role in the Marine Corps, he's also helping out a program, and at the end of the day, hoping to help out a few kids. So with that, I'd like to wish everyone, I know it's a little early this year, but I'd like to wish everyone a happy holiday, Merry Christmas and all that. It's probably hopefully the first time you've heard that this year. But again, I'd like to just hand these out to you real quick and then ask Sergeant Hall to come up and offer a certificate to you.
Sure. Hey, Frank, real quickly, before you just step away from the mic, it's the holiday season, and Toys for Tots gets the appropriate amount of attention this time of year for obvious reasons, but I think I've asked you this in the past, and I just want to kind of ask it again publicly again. Toys for Tots is there all year long, and there are tragedies and events or circumstances that happen throughout the year where a family may find themselves maybe in need after a fire, or maybe who knows what the circumstances may be. They can contact you or go through the same method to access toys, is that right?
Yeah, as you say, I mean, Toys for Tots is mainly a holiday, Christmas, whichever you want to call it, type program, but there are a lot of emergencies. I know, like Hurricane Katrina, they sent a ton of stuff down there. And like I say, on the local level, yes, I mean, if there's fires, and a lot of times there's weird stuff, unfortunately, that happens after the holidays. So Toys for Tots is there to step in for families that may be an abuse family or something like that, and help out after the holidays. But again, a lot of that stuff is kind of case by case and low key, but they do try to help as many residents as they can, including residents here in Wilmington. So, yeah, to answer you, the short answer is yes, Mike.
Thank you. How do we want to do this?
Yeah, I don't know exactly.
You want to go
Again, gentlemen, I just want to thank you all very much for your time. Appreciate it, and thank you very much. And again, a special thank you to Sergeant Hall as well as the other Marines and many civilians that are involved in the program. So again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's always a very enjoyable, positive way to start a meeting this time of year, so we certainly thank them for coming here and their involvement. Our scheduled 7:15 appointment is with Denise Casey, Assistant Town Manager, who will discuss with us, excuse me, the renewal of Comcast cable television license. Ms. Casey? We have a mic issue.
Plenty of mics.
Oop,
Want this one?
it sounds live.
Denise, you want this? Dee, you want this?
It sounds like you. Forgive us, folks, we're in a little bit of a different environment than we typically are. We're usually in town hall for our Board of Selectmen meetings, but we're in a new spot, so we're adapting.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Denise.
So I'd like to first start off by introducing the two members from the Cable TV Advisory Task Force meeting that are here this evening. We have Mr. Robert Lopez and Mr. George Breslin. I'd like to thank them for volunteering their time to go through this long process for the cable renewal license. We also have with us Bill August, who is the town's cable attorney, Kathy Maloney, who is our Comcast representative, and of course, Sean Neville, who is the WCTV Executive Director, and I appreciate them being with us this evening. I'd like to also recognize former IT Director for the town, Kendra Rosette, and former IT Director for the schools, Anne Marie Fiore, who were on the committee prior to leaving the town's employment, and also recognize Beverly Dalton, who chaired the committee before I came here last December. So I'd like to thank them for their efforts. If I could read for the record the legal notice that was posted at the town clerk's office on October 18th, 2017. The Board of Selectmen of the town of Wilmington, Massachusetts, being the town's cable license franchising authority, hereby gives notice that on November 13th, 2017, 7:05 p.m., the Selectmen will hold a public hearing at Town Hall, which will be the high school, on the cable television license renewal proposal for the Comcast Communications License LLC. The purpose of the proceeding is to accept public comment, formally consider and possibly take a final action on approval of the proposed license, a copy of which is available for public inspection and copying for the town clerk's office. Public comment is invited. For further information or copies of the license, please see D. Casey, Assistant Town Manager, care of Town Hall, by order of the Board of Selectmen as Cable Television Licensing Franchising Authority. So to take you through the process, the task force met November 1st and December 1st of 2016, and then on January 5th of 2017, I took over as chair, and we had a meeting to discuss the ascertainment report. And some of you may recall the ascertainment report was the report where we look at the cable operator's performance over the existing contract and look at what the cable needs of the town may be. And at that meeting, Sean Neville was present. So while he was not a voting member of the committee, he was instrumental in helping us get information on the value of WCTV and its relationship with Comcast. On February 13th, we had a Board of Selectmen meeting where we presented to you the ascertainment report. And then on February 27th, 2017, you voted to accept that report. On May 9th and May 25th, 2017, we began the informal negotiation process with Comcast, and that group represented Jeff Hull, Town Manager, myself, Bill August, Kathy Maloney, and Sean Neville was also present, and Sean made some presentations on both the operating and capital needs of WCTV. On July 25th, the task force met again, and we met to review the status of the informal negotiation process and to make recommendations to the bargaining committee as to the final report. On September 28th of 2017, the town received the renewal proposal from Comcast, and what that consists of is it's like a business perspective that describes Comcast's ownership structure, the financial information, the coverage area, etc. And the intervening time was spent finalizing the final license. And on November 3rd, 2017, in your packets, we put the final draft license. So I'd like to highlight for you what some of the differences or some of the things to look for. We have a franchise fee equal to 5% of gross annual revenues, which is the maximum allowed under law. We have capital funding of $210,000 over 10 years, or $21,000 a year. And it should be noted that this level of funding is very solid in light of Comcast's loss of subscribers to Verizon as a competitor. Strong language regarding license administration and customer service. A senior discount for those 65 and over off the digital starter package. And an encoder upgrade to help the digital interface and the access for the cable stations. So at this time, I would like to offer Bill August, Kathy Maloney, and Sean Neville the opportunity to offer some comments to the board on behalf of the license renewal process. Bill?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Board of Selectmen, I'm Bill August, Cable Counsel to the town of Wilmington. Denise provided a very comprehensive report on the procedural history of this renewal, as well as a summary of the key substantive elements of the proposed renewal license. I don't have that much, really don't have anything to add. I think she's covered the main points. I would note that the ascertainment report that was referenced by Denise Casey, adopted by the Selectmen on February 27th, 2017, was very detailed, approximately 15-page detailed report in, itemizing the local facility operating and capital budget needs, as well as needs for the encoder digital interface and the other needs that were ultimately successfully incorporated into the proposed license. So I think it was an excellent process. The town did its homework in the ascertainment process, identifying in a detailed manner the substantive cable-related needs of the town of Wilmington. And our objective was to reflect those needs in a draft license, which town officials and Comcast hammered out through the negotiations process. And in my opinion, those objectives were met as reflected in the proposed license, which is before you tonight. They were recommended by the town officials that worked on the document, subject, of course, to the approval of the Board of Selectmen. The Selectmen are the licensing authority under Massachusetts law, so it's totally your call. It's not really up to the committee or town officials or anyone else. It's a Selectmen, it's the franchising authority. And it's before you. I think Denise had a very simple approval motion, but tonight is also a public hearing. So, and the public is, if the procedure also includes, before making any final decisions, seeing if they're here deliberating on any comments or additional testimony that might come forward at tonight's public hearing. Thank you. Just one other procedural point for the record. Denise Casey mentioned how that legal notice was posted by the town clerk. I would also add that it was published in the local newspaper 2 consecutive weeks. So
was definitely summed it up. It was a nice, nice process with Dee and Kathy and Bill. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So if the board has any questions for anyone, we'll also open it up to the public if there are anyone that wants to make any public comments before we turn it over to the board.
My name is Axel Mashak. I have a question to the representative from the town about the cables. So, does town have any preference for Comcast or any other providers like Verizon or any others?
No, the town does not have a preference for either company.
One more question. When is the Verizon's next renewal of the licenses coming?
There is still 5 more years on the Verizon license renewal.
Anyone else from the audience? Want to make sure any questions are addressed? Certainly, we'll bring it up here. Anyone from, yeah, Mr. Loud, please.
Mr. Chairman, either Dee or Sean, why no HD this year? Thought that was a simple move for you guys.
It's a move for us. It's not something that the cable operators can kind of flip the switch on. So it's something that we were certainly looking to do, and we do everything in HD, but it was some technical hurdles I think on their end that maybe Bill can sum it up better than that.
Just some. Comcast has not agreed to provide high definition for PEG access channels in any of its Massachusetts licenses. So we're in good company. That's what was represented to us during the negotiations. Is that still the case? Right. Comcast has agreed to language to meet with and revisit and discuss high definition, but has not ceded the control over its transmission technology to any local franchising authority in Massachusetts. It's not for lack of trying. It's a great question. It's a question being asked by many towns and cities in the Commonwealth. Comcast has explained that they're going in that direction, but will not be doing it on a town-by-town basis. It will be more of a regional or statewide business judgment when they switch PEG access to high definition and not do it on a regional basis, town-by-town. So many big cities with very strong negotiating teams have diligently pursued that from Comcast and to no avail. So we're in good company. It's not like
Do you think it's going to be another,
they're not getting something that other towns and cities have obtained.
do we have to wait for our next contract, which is 10 years, or do you think it might be sooner? Not that I want to see my ugly mug on high definition TV, but I was just wondering.
I think, I don't know the answer to that, but the position of Comcast is it will not be based on the license expirations and commencements, but it will just be introduced by Comcast when they're technologically ready, which is how they make many of their system upgrades. Some, not pursuant to license mandate, but just to market forces and their own business judgment. So
Thank you.
that's the landscape on the PEG access HP right now.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, Mr. Garrett?
Just a question, if I could. What is a digital starter package? I noticed that you're offering a $2 a month discount for a digital starter package.
It's one remote control and one cable box, probably.
Digital starter is a basic digital package, so it is, most of our cable subscribers have that as their entry-level package. There is a lower tier probably, but it is the most common subscriber tier. And that senior discount that you're referring to is a standard offer. We don't do senior discounts in the
I noticed how it's worked into the language of the contract, but I also noticed on the next page that we received that Comcast has the right to eliminate it at its sole discretion at any time. So once the contract is signed and it's effective on January 29th, is there a likelihood on January 30th that it's going to be gone?
I think you're referring to a side letter.
Yep.
Senior discount, that's not actually the body of the contract, and the reason it's a side letter is because, rates are one of the things off the table when it comes to local licensing, cable television licenses. So we can't negotiate rates or programming. So because of that, where we have a town like Wilmington that was interested in a discount, we still were open to discussion, but we treated it as a side letter as opposed to in the contract language. So in that letter, it is subsidy, it does run along the same course of time as the license, it's just not part of the body of the language of the license. We do reserve the right to change it. I think we mentioned specifically if there is a region or statewide adoption of a discount, we reserve the right to go to that. So, but in my experience, and I've been around a long, long time, they stick. So we have in many communities, and they run their 10-year term with the contract, and we often renew them for the subsequent terms. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, pretty much, I get it. It doesn't, they're still going to get the $2 discount.
Right, and I would note
That
too
you're-
that we do offer other tiers of service that are even more affordable that doesn't even speak to, but, you know, in my experience, that just sticks and it stays term of the contract. So I wouldn't be concerned about that.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Great. No? My only question, if I could, I'm not sure who this goes to. Maybe it's you, Sean, I'm not sure. There was some discussion earlier about the high definition signal at some hopefully future date when the technology is available widely. Is that tethered together with being able to use the guide to see what's going on, or are those two things independent?
Those two, from Comcast, those are separate.
Okay.
And I was in front of you a couple months ago talking about the State House that talks about HD and on-screen program guide. Those are netted together in one bill, and that's an effort by me and colleagues in the fund to kind of give a little nudge in that direction.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. That was where my head was. Okay, so Dee, I think everyone has had the opportunity to ask questions, and we've certainly given the opportunity for the public. Is the next step just I'm sorry, Jeff, I don't know if I'm talking to you, but maybe you. We're taking a vote here. Is that the plan?
If you are comfortable with the presentation and the public comment, you may take a motion this evening.
To that end, then, gentlemen, I put it to you, if over the course of, before I say that, I guess we could have said this in discussion. I wanted to give compliments to Mr. Lopez and Mr. Breslin for participating in this process along the way. Thank you for your time, gentlemen, and as Attorney August as well for your counsel in that regard. So I didn't want to leave that off the grid. Thank you, of course, Ms. Maloney, for being here as well, and Sean for your ongoing efforts. Yes, sir.
Particular thanks to Jeff Holland, Denise Casey, who were in the committee, who were available at every turn if ever I needed anything, or the town needed anything for this process. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you saying so, sir. Thank you. So I'm sorry, to that end, I would accept a motion, if someone feels so inclined to make one, to approve the license for another 10-year contract with Comcast.
So moved.
I have that made motion.
Seconded.
And seconded by Mr. Loud. Any further discussion on this? I see none. All in favor of that? It is unanimous. Thank you all for your involvement, for your advice, and we look forward to continuing to enjoy Comcast signals. Why don't we go, after the meeting, we're just discussing here, we'd have a little signing party after the meeting up here, gentlemen, at the close of discussions. Yes, sir, thank you. Good evening. So our scheduled 7:30 appointment is with, again, our Assistant Town Manager, Dee Casey, with regards to the use of assessment centers for police and fire department. And forgive me for just a second, looks like Ms. Casey is a little bit tied up. Jeff, do you want to do a basic introduction to this concept, or we want to wait for Dee to jump right in? Sorry, Dee, I was doing my thing and I didn't realize you were engaged there, so you're on. It's on, yeah, I think it goes into sleep mode when someone steps away.
Thank you very much. I am here to provide you with an overview of the assessment center processes that the town will be undertaking over the next 2 months, and we have a PowerPoint presentation to go along with it. I'm not sure if the lights could be dimmed slightly so the audience could see the presentation a little bit better. However, I will move on. So we're talking about assessment centers and why are they smart business decisions. So what are assessment centers? They are a process that evaluates the management and administrative competencies of supervisors, managers, and executives. Thank you. In an assessment center, candidates participate in a series of exercises, and then they are evaluated on their performance in each exercise using a certain criteria, often called competencies. And what positions are typically tested in assessment centers? Usually you have police command, fire command, town administrators, town managers, and department head level positions. So what positions in Wilmington will be tested over the coming months? Well, for the Wilmington Fire Department, we have the chief's position, the deputy chief's position, and the fire lieutenant position. And for the Wilmington Police Department, we'll be testing for the police lieutenant position and the police sergeant position. We have a current vacancy in the police sergeant position, so that assessment center will take place first. While we currently do not have an open vacancy in the lieutenant position, it is best practices to have an existing exam from which we could promote once a vacancy takes place. So what does an assessment center evaluate? Well, it looks at particular competencies such as leadership, supervisory skills, communication, decision-making, problem analysis, judgment, reasoning, technical competence, planning, administration, and strategic thinking, persuasion, negotiation, counseling, organizational awareness, situational awareness, conflict management, and most important, human relation and interpersonal skills. So who participates in an assessment center? We have the exercise coordinator, who is usually known as the vendor. In this case, we will be using Mark Morse of MMA Consulting Group, who has over 25 years of experience conducting police and fire assessment centers. We have candidates, who are the people who actually go through the assessment center process. We have the assessors, and assessors are typically retired police chiefs, fire chiefs, deputy chiefs, town managers, town administrators, and sometimes human resource professionals. The role players, and they are typically the assessors, but oftentimes there are people that are brought in to do role plays in terms of some things they play are the disgruntled employee or the disgruntled citizen. And you have your representatives from the municipality. So for these assessment centers, the town manager and myself will be observing the assessment centers as they go on. So what is the timeline for an assessment center process? I'm sorry. The timeline for the assessment center process, so in 2017, we received sole delegation agreements from the Civil Service Commission, which that allows the town to basically conduct the assessment center process. We then need to go through the bidding process. We then did vendor interviews, and in the interest of transparency, we invited the union leadership to watch the vendor interviews with us so that they could ask any questions and voice any concerns that they may have about the process. We selected our vendor, Mark Morse of MMA Consulting Group, and he has won the competitive bid for Mark met with the department heads. He met with Chief Michael DeGonis and Chief Rick McClellan to talk about the department and the needs of the department. He then met and spoke with myself and Jeff. There will be orientation sessions. Our first orientation session will be November 20th for the fire chief and the deputy fire chief assessment center processes, which will be the first to take place. And in the meantime, the vendor is preparing the assessment center exercises and the exams. The assessment center will be conducted on December 6th. The scores are then sent to civil service. And in 2018, civil service will certify the promotional list, and then a candidate will be selected. So how are these exercises developed? So they're developed by the vendor meeting and looking at the town department, the particular department that the assessment center applies to, and doing some research, gathering information from the chiefs, from Jeff, myself, town reports, statistics, etc. They review specific knowledge, skills, and behaviors and characteristics that determine success. So they look at what makes a successful sergeant, what makes a successful lieutenant, what makes a successful chief. Interviews with key staff. They look at current industry trends, such as the rise in need for medical services in the fire side, and they will look at things like the increased need of addressing the opioid crisis that we have. And they also look at the town's priorities and how that matches. And just to know, for civil service regulation, the town is prohibited from contributing to or reviewing any of the assessment center exercises. So we see them the day of the assessment, the same as the candidates do. So what type of exercises are administered? So there's a number of different exercises that can be administered. So for example, the program planning exercise is typically a two-part exercise where candidates are given a written assignment and then they need to present that in front of a panel. The employee interview counseling exercise, they're asked to counsel an employee and the assessors watch and see how they do that. Other types of exercises are oral interviews. There could be a training presentation that the candidates are asked to make. And one of the things that we are doing here in Wilmington for the non-chief level positions is we're customizing the written exam. So we are writing our own exam in replace of the civil service HRD exam. And by doing so, we can customize the exam. The chiefs get to select the books that the exam material is taken from, and it pertains more to what's happening here in Wilmington versus the civil service HRD exam is the same for someone who's coming from the city of Chelsea or the town of Orange. This way we can make it a very much a Wilmington-based exam. And how are they scored? So the assessors use a metrics that is applied to each exercise. And again, the town is barred from participating at all during the assessment center day. We may observe the assessment center. We may not comment on any of the candidates. We may not engage with the assessor. We even eat lunch separately from the assessors. So at the completion of each candidate's exercise, the assessors discuss the candidate's performance and develop a consensus rating. And all of the assessors have been trained prior to coming to the town of Wilmington, obviously, on how to evaluate candidates in this setting. So we have experienced assessors. All the assessment center elements are combined into a final score. And the final scores are sent to civil service for their evaluation. And then civil service adds any civil service points, which could be years of experience and veteran status. And then the town is given a certified promotional list from which to make a promotion. So what are the benefits of an assessment center over a traditional written civil service exam? Assessment centers are not new, and my research shows that they go back all the way to World War II, where they were finding that they were candidates that were scoring extremely well on the captain's exams, the officer exams, but they were doing very poorly in the battlefield. So they thought, well, let's put these candidates through real life tactical scenarios and see who then comes out studiers or can better memorize text materials. And in our case, and in all cases with assessment centers, the exam materials are customized, the exercises are customized, therefore more reflective of the position and the community. And as you know, public safety employees typically have a very long career, so when you promote someone, they're going to be promoted in that rank for probably a long time. And failure to promote the best individual can lead to increased liability down the road and decreased productivity of subordinates. So it's important to make the right decision. So how much do they cost? So the assessment centers are priced based on the rank being tested, the number of exercises, whether or not there's going to be a customized exam, the number of assessors required, and the number of candidates. So for our purposes, the original pricing for the 3 assessment centers on the fire side was $31,400. But by combining the fire chief and the deputy fire chief exams to take place on the same day, we are saving $7,700. So that's something that civil service allows, and that's something that we felt, obviously saving money for the town is in the best interest of the town. So those candidates that are interested in both positions will go through the whole assessment center. Those candidates that are just interested in the deputy chief will do some of the exercises, but not the exercises that pertain to the chief level. And this has been done before and approved by HRD, so this is not something that's new and may be contested. And the candidates are going to be paying $200 to cover costs, and as I stated before, the cost of promoting the wrong individual costs significantly more than the assessment center process does. And I have the chiefs, I have both chiefs with me. If you have any questions, we're happy to provide answers.
Thank you, Denise. I appreciate the presentation. I only have one question, and maybe more will come to me as the Q&A period kind of goes on. This is brand new to us in Wilmington. Is this the first time that we're using these kind of centers, or expand on that, please?
They've been done in the fire department, but not in the police department.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, let me go to the board here. Yeah, please, Mr. Love.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The assessment centers are for only public safety employees. Well, why not the school department or department heads when we go to hire a new department head, for example?
They are not restricted to public safety personnel. I have seen them done in modified forms for a variety of positions, IT directors, assistant town managers. So they are done for a variety of different positions.
Has either you or Jeff looked at doing it for other positions, or the town looked at other positions? I mean, we are looking for superintendent for schools.
We have, to this point, we have not looked at this using assessment centers for other department head positions with respect to the schools. It's not, I'm not sure whether they have looked at this as an option. It's not a discussion I've had with either members of the school committee or the interim superintendent.
One more question. You mentioned a sergeant position for the police departments up soon. What if any outside candidates come in? Would that include them also?
No, this process is restricted as promotional internal for Wilmington officers and firefighters only.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this is a new tool, and I see the fire chief and the police chief here, and obviously I'd like to get their spin on it, on how they feel, how you feel personally as a chief of police and a fire chief, and what about the men working under you? Has there been any talk about this at all?
If I could offer some comment, I've been involved in assessment centers since around 2000. So I have pretty much done all levels of rank in both police and fire. And I also have worked with Mark Morse in the past and had excellent experience with him. So I am comfortable with the process from the administrative standpoint, and I will let them speak from the operational standpoint.
Thank you.
So just so we know, I am a product of an assessment center. So if there are any complaints, you can gear it up to that. But so we've had, over the years, the process has been always civil service tests that you studied for 6 to 8 months, read 2,000 to 2,400 pages of text, and they ask you 80 questions out of all those books. It was a memory game. That's all it was what you could remember. A lot of things, exactly what Denise had indicated, it has nothing to do with what we do in Wilmington. So we changed it. We have the last round of lieutenants, we hired 4 lieutenants, and that was an assessment process also, and it worked out very well. So it's nothing really new to us. The only new position is the deputy chief's position. The last test that we had, Deputy Donovan's in there now, and that was a written test. The other, which they're becoming more and more, for instance, in 2017, there were no chief tests at all from Massachusetts, because there was only 4 chiefs that retired, and it cost them so much money to run a civil service test. So there was not anything in 2017. My understanding is they're getting rid of it completely, so the town would have to do it on its own anyways. So we're kind of ahead in the curve. I know they're doing it for deputy chiefs, is what I was told. There's not enough civil service departments that they need to run the test for, and it costs too much money. So I think it's a benefit. I think you get a well-rounded person out of it instead of a person that's really a very book-smart person, because the scenarios they put you through are what you deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I think the process is very well-received on our side. We have some good candidates that are coming up, and I think it's going to go very smoothly. So.
Thank you, Chief McClellan, and thank you for the board for allowing me to offer some comments relative to assessment centers. A big fan of them. I am a product of the standardized test out of the books. I think the police department had probably 3 times as many pages as the fire department had to read to qualify for it at the end of the day. Assessment centers measure dimensions of the individual, not just what they can regurgitate out of a book. The blessing of them is we can tailor them directly to what they need to know as supervisors or division commanders in Wilmington. So we can use the town bylaws, the policies and procedures of the department, which are not dimensions that they had measured previously on your standardized test. So the benefits to that is it's more tailored towards Wilmington. To your questions earlier, this was all discussed. It's a mandatory subject to the bargaining having to do with promotions, so it was discussed with the unions ahead of time, and they have an agreement that this will be the platform that we can use going forward. So looking forward to it. It's not something that traditionally has moved down through the ranks. It's something that's fairly new, being used for sergeants and lieutenants. It was primarily for chiefs and deputy chiefs in the past, but there's a lot of promise in moving it down through the ranks as well, because you don't know what you don't know at the end of the day. You can read a lot about being a leader in a book, but to be able to show the actual skills that are needed for that is something that's measured within the assessment center process. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just think it's important to hear from the #1 cop and the #1 firefighter here in the town. I understand how it works, and I know it's a valuable tool. I've taken many a test myself, obviously, but you're right. You know, you study hard and you answer 80 questions, and somebody who's book smart, not knocking anybody who's book smart, obviously, but in real life situations, common sense, and how things happen through the process. So I think it's important for our chiefs to at least put some input, because that way the residents out there this is probably the first time they've heard of it. You know, so I think it's important we heard from you guys. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm going to go in line, if that's all right. You know, it's interesting. Where I am in my life is my kids are taking SATs and preparing for college application time and all the stuff that goes along with that. And more colleges now, and anyone that's in this process or has recently gone through this process recognizes that more and more colleges now are either saying they don't need the SAT results, or they're going what they call test optional, because they're much more interested in looking at this holistic student as what the capabilities of the student are from a grades perspective, but also what are the activities, how do they perform under certain circumstances, all of that. So, you know, that seems consistent, and then what this seems to offer is really a holistic view of the candidate. So yes, I mean, I think testing is certainly a piece of of their performance. Are they capable of studying and applying themselves and learning the content? But then are they also capable of putting that into action? So, both of those things and all of that together, to me, ensures that we're putting the right people in the right positions. So I endorse it, and I appreciate the presentation on it. So I'll let you go down, Mr.
Yeah,
Carey.
I appreciate the presentation as well. It's in the contract, as the chief said, so it's there already. So that's a good thing. Just one quick question on the vendor. Now, as the vendor was selected from a regular bidding process, and that vendor works on behalf of the town for assessment of those that are going to be hired?
That is correct. We went through a competitive bid process. 3 vendors submitted bids. One was not considered, it was not technically sound. We brought in 2 vendors to interview, and we selected the vendor that had the most responsible and responsive proposal and was also the least expensive. Mark will act on our behalf to administer the assessment center and will work obviously closely with us, except he can't, obviously divulge any of the exam materials, but he has worked closely with me on getting the announcements out, making sure that we are complying every step of the way with civil service regulations. Because at the end of the day, this is still a civil service process, even though they have delegated much of the work to the town of Wilmington and assisted by our vendor.
And the hiring has to be from within, you mentioned, so you can't go outside for qualified candidates?
Correct. This is a department promotional exam, so there are no outside candidates to be considered.
Thank you.
Mr. Battle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dee, thank you very much for both presentations, but particularly this one. I appreciate your expertise here. I think it's beneficial to the town that you've had experience with this. I think you're dating back to early 2000s, so that's a benefit to the towns. I appreciate that. Gentlemen, thank you for your insight. And I just want to add that I'm most pleased to see that this could translate to some cost savings for the town, and that I think this is obviously a valuable tool to the community, specifically with the customization of the test, customized to Wilmington. I think that'll be beneficial to the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Wonderful. Jeff, did you have any additional commentary on this at all? Or?
I think it's pretty well been stated.
Very well. Dee, thank you very much for your time on both of those matters. And to both chiefs, thank you for your commentary. So moving on to the scheduled 7:45 appointment, just a tad late. And the reason why we are in this grand space was our anticipation that we would need the additional space. And as it turns out, we didn't. I think the weather might be holding some people back. But it is with Valerie Gingrich, our Director of Planning and Conservation, so that the Board of Selectmen can receive direction on whether to prepare an article for the 2018 annual town meeting with regards to a question, should we consider selling town-owned land for the development of affordable housing? So, Ms. Gingrich, do I see you in the room? Yes, I believe that I do. So Valerie is going to, I think, give us a summary of where we are and where we've come. Valerie, I know that, or just for public consumption, you have addressed us on a number of occasions over the course of this year, really, to advise us and educate us, for lack of a better word, on 40B as a concept and where Wilmington is and where Wilmington will be. So in conversations with Jeff in discussion or in preparation for this evening, I certainly felt it was worthwhile to 30,000-foot summarize and review some of that content so we can have a baseline for our conversation. So I give you the floor.
Thank you. I had some handouts at the door. I hope everyone saw that. If you didn't, I have a few in my hand if you want to come grab any. And you should have that as well. Perfect, yes. Just a two-sided document that hopefully can serve as sort of a cheat sheet for you, because there's a lot of information here, and I'm going to go through it. I can go through pretty slowly, but there's still a lot there. So I thought you might want to have a reference in your hand. So let's get started. I'm going to go over, I'm here tonight to talk about housing, particularly affordable housing, where we are with our requirements, and so I don't know if it's okay to take questions as we go along because it's a lot of material, but I'll I'll try to explain myself pretty thoroughly. Starting out with the goal of the Commonwealth is to provide affordable housing, multifamily housing in each town. And that goal is in the form of a requirement. So each town is required to have 10% of their housing stock as affordable and counting towards their subsidized housing inventory. And I'll explain what that is. If you have your 10% of your housing stock as affordable, you can kind of plan for more housing, more affordable housing as the town sees fit. If you're under the 10%, you're susceptible to 40B projects, and those projects are through the Board of Appeals. Developers can propose projects that are larger, denser, that don't comply with our zoning, and can be built in non-residential districts. The idea there is that if you're under the 10%, you don't have enough affordable housing, so it's easier for projects to be built that include affordable housing. So what is the subsidized housing inventory, the SHI? That's basically just the list of units that are counted as affordable. So it's your list of 10% units. And how do you qualify for the 10% list? A unit has to be deed restricted, it has to be marketed in a fair way, and it has to be affordable to incomes at 80% AMI or lower. And what's AMI? AMI is area median income. It's a sort of an average, so it's sort of an average income of our general area, Metro Boston. And the AMI for our area is 103,400. And the state defines affordable as, well, I guess it's the highest level of affordable. The maximum that is deemed affordable is 80% of that number. So a family of four could make up to 78,000. An individual could make up to 54,000, and that's sort of, you're in that 80% affordable range. And I'll get into more detail with that in the next slide. So affordable, we're not necessarily saying what certain people think is affordable. We're really going by what the state defines as affordable. And it's a very specific number. Like I said, 80% of that AMI number, and the income limits are, like I said, 78,000, 54,000. That's where you're in that 80% AMI kind of threshold. I put some examples of what sale prices and rent prices are for 80%. So for instance, for sale, median sale price this year, this was on Zillow, right now for November is $469,000 for a home. An affordable home, a 3-bedroom, would sell for $223,500. So there's quite a bit of difference there between what our median sale price is and what is really the maximum affordable level. Rents, 2015 median rent in town was just over $1,600. You really have to make that median income to afford that level of rent. So affordable rent at 80%, examples there, a 1-bedroom, $1,287 plus utility allowance, a 2-bedroom, $1,412 plus utility allowance. So as you can see, it's a bit of a discount from what our median or average is in town. And some statistics for you, 50% of the town's households make less than area median income. 20% of the households in town make less than $50,000 of income. So it's, there's definitely a need for affordable housing in town for residents who currently live in town. And this just shows a little bit of the examples of some of the rents, some of the sales, and all of these numbers are based on the 80% number, and that's the maximum that's considered affordable. You can go lower than that. You can go to 50% area median income, and that would be obviously a lot lower than these prices, but this is basically just the maximum that can be considered affordable. So now that we've gone over some context and some definitions, where are we with our 10% number? So right now, we are at 10.4%, and this percentage is the number of affordable units over the total number of housing units. So we've got 810 units, affordable units, and currently our number is based on the 2010 census numbers for total households, or total dwelling units. So this doesn't reflect today's number of household units. According to some numbers that the building department keeps for number of building permits for homes, over the last, 7 years, we've added 228 units. So that bottom number is actually now over 8,000 units as of November 1st. And when you kind of plug that number of where we are today into that equation, you come out with 10.1%. So we've dropped a bit below where we were in 2010. But currently, the state still looks at the 10.4 for now, until the new census is taken in 2020. And that's what we'll talk about next. So in 2020, a couple things are happening. We're going to lose a few of our affordable units. That's the top numbers. That's going down. The reason for that is some of our units were affordable for a term of 15 years. And those 15 years are now expiring. So they can't be renewed. It's a program that the state no longer counts towards the numbers. And so those 15-year affordable units are falling off of the list. So that number is going down. The bottom number is going up because we're creating more housing dwellings in town. Like I said, we've added 228 since 2010, and we're projected to keep going. We're looking like we're going to average 30 to 40 units per year if we keep going at the rate we're going, and the projects that are in construction now and approved for construction are going to keep going. So we're on target to be about just over 8,100 housing units. So when you change those numbers to reflect the projection for 2020, you come out with 9.4%. So we're going to be below 10%. And to get back up to 10% in 2020, I've calculated that we need about 60 to 70 units, affordable units, so the top number there, to get back up to the 10%. So what can we do? We have a couple choices. We can either kind of do nothing, that is an option, and fall below the 10%. The town would be forced to, or the ZBA, the Zoning Board of Appeals, would be forced to approve 40B projects, those projects that are larger and don't have to follow the zoning rules. That's how we got a lot of our affordable units and some of our apartments in town. Avalon, Metro, Regency, a bunch of those places were built with that process. So it is an option to fall below the 10% and then have 40B projects be built. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that the town doesn't have control over those projects. The developers really dictate what they're going to build, how big they're going to build, and where they're going to build. The other option is to leverage town resources, specifically land, for the development of affordable units. Town-owned land, TOL for short, could be used to create age-restricted over 55 apartments for a range of incomes with at least 25% of the units counted as affordable. When you have a rental project with 25% of the units as affordable, all of the units count. So it's just sort of a strange math thing that the state does. So each of these things, the option to take no action, again, the 40B developments are don't comply with zoning. They're larger, they're denser, they're in any location. There's no local control over those. It's really controlled by the development community and approved through the state. And it's sort of there's an unplanned demand for services. It's not necessarily something you've accounted for in your regular growth patterns. Again, it's a very much a lack of control on the local side. The other option to leverage town resources, the town is finishing up a facility master plan to kind of provide a strategy of how to invest in our buildings, where our facilities should be located. And as a part of that plan, and as directed by town meeting in 2015, the plan includes consideration for age-restricted housing. And the plan specifically points out that the parcel, the 7.5 acre parcel that's owned by the town next to St. Dorothy's on Main Street and Glen Road is suited for this use. So this is a little diagram. I think I have a pointer here. So the bottom, this is the St. Dorothy's parcel. Right here is St. Dorothy's Church. Main Street runs this way. This parcel is 7.5 acres along Main Street. It goes back to Glen Road. It's kind of that nice wooded spot you see along Glen Road. This is the entrance to Town Hall. And the plan envisions a new senior center at the Town Hall site, and points out that this parcel would be great for senior housing, and meaning age-restricted over 55 housing. The parcel is located on sewer. It's close to shopping and services. It's on the regional bus line, and it's across from the future senior center at the Town Hall site. So how would this idea kind of come about? The process would be, we do have a zoning district that allows over 55 housing, and it really, it could provide kind of the context for us to envision this site. It would provide 10 units per acre, so around the right number of units that we need for our 10%, about 70 units. So it could be the parcel could be rezoned to the over 55 housing overlay. It would be surplused, so it could be sold to a private developer, sold or leased to a private developer to have them build the housing. The town would not be building housing. We're not going to get into that business. Private developer would build the housing, run the housing, and we would specify in a request for proposals the minimums. So you have to have 25% affordable. You have to have it at 80% or lower. You have to make it, the design fit into the character. You have to make the units accessible, and provide a local preference for 2/3 of the units to be marketed to Wilmington residents. So we can kind of specify what we want to see in a development to a certain degree, and then we put out the request for proposals and get interest from the development community. So the questions that are in my mind, I guess, and I think are sort of floating around, should the town try to create affordable units on town-owned land to stay above the 10% to avoid 40B developments? And should this idea be placed on the warrant for annual town meeting for the residents to vote? And those are the questions we were sort of presented with.
Thank you, Valerie. Yeah, that's a comprehensive summary in a relatively short period of time, given that really we've been wrestling with this for the better part of a year. So I compliment you for making that concise but comprehensive at the same time. So the Board of Selectmen has heard a number of these pieces of information a number of times through the year, and at one of our recent meetings came to the conclusion that we wanted to try to elicit the opinion of residents to determine, ideally, I'm hoping that a vote will be taken this evening to decide whether or not to give the town manager instructions to craft language for an article that will go on the regular town meeting, or not. So that's the discussion I think ultimately that we want to have, but we wanted to get input from you. about this. So the discussion is not about necessarily the definitions of affordable housing and sort of whether or not Wilmington needs it. I think we've acknowledged, I'd like to hopefully accept the baseline of the math that Valerie has presented to us. So, the question then is do we take a proactive or a reactive approach on this, and what's the thinking of the residents? So I want to focus our discussion, if at all possible, on the recommendations or the idea of using town-owned land to address the 40B issue. So that's the discussion. I want to invite folks to take a microphone and step up, identify yourself, your name and your address, and we'll just welcome your feedback and suggestions. And I see one individual, so sir, please.
Good evening, Stephen Turner, 59 Washington Avenue. Thank you, Ms. Gingrich. It was very, very helpful, very informative. And first of all, I think the 10% Massachusetts regulation is fantastic. It keeps us diverse, interesting communities that are great places for our kids to grow up. I have a concern with the idea of using town-owned land now without having an additional element to it to prevent us from being back here in 10 years. And that element would be a requirement that any new construction after this, more than, say, 5 units, has a minimum, so that we continually keep our stock at more than 10%, so we don't have to do a large request in the future. Don't just do the land, because we'll be back here in 10 years and have to give up more town land. There isn't a limit to how much land is available that the town owns. So put something else to it. Make it a two-part proposal. Town-owned land now, okay. If it's a good proposal, people vote for it, yes or no. But separately, if that's passed, there's also an element. More than 5 units, at least one has to be affordable. More than 10 units, at least 2, so on and so forth, so that the minimum for anything past 5 is a single-family home. There's not much you could do. But if somebody's building 10 houses, some of it should be affordable. And particular houses as well as apartments. We shouldn't have a town where everything affordable is an apartment and everything that's a house is by definition not affordable housing. There should be a blend. And so if you make it a smaller number, not 20, not 30, but 5, then you get consistently a mix of development that will help people have houses. We want to have the people who make $50,000 be able to afford a house and not just an apartment in town. Then you have good neighborhoods and good apartment buildings that are a mix in both cases. But I definitely have this fear of being back here in 10 years. I don't mind it as a one-time thing. We do have good resources, but there's a limit to that as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. I think, Valerie, I'm going to ask you maybe to address that maybe live as we go. I think what he went towards was inclusionary zoning. So I know there had been some discussion about the notion or what you had discussed, sir. But Valerie, if you want to expand on that, please.
Sure. Yeah, we did. We discussed, in fact, that exact idea. So writing into zoning a requirement that, if you're building a certain amount of units, you have to do 10% affordable or 12% affordable. The challenge will be kind of coming up with the numbers and figuring it out, but the plan is to work for the next year to figure that out and then come in with a zoning proposal.
The one concern, I'm sorry, I'll speak really loud. One concern with that is we're too late. By the time we get, even if we do this one bit, there's a point where we could be under the 10% for a period of time. If we're not fairly proactive in changing the zoning, there's a risk that even if we start that process, we may be too late and we may have, and again, 40B, sometimes you end up with good places. I have friends that live in almost all those places you mentioned. So the concern is timing someone too, if we're not proactive on the zoning.
Right, so the concern is that if we don't act quickly on an inclusionary requirement, we could fall behind again. And I'm comfortable with, I think it's maybe a little bit rushed to propose something at this coming town meeting in May, but I would really like to have something in 2019, yeah.
Through the chair, to Ms. Gingrich, the inclusionary zoning has been out there for quite some time now, hasn't it? I mean, you've been
In other
sitting on that
towns?
for a little bit. That you've been talking about this for over a year.
Yeah,
Okay, so, and nothing's been done at this point in time. So you're now projecting to do it a year from now?
from what I've been told, there was previous talk about doing something similar in the years before I came to Wilmington. I think it was not a popular idea. And so in the meantime, I've sort of been getting developer opinions about it, working to figure out how we can come up with something that is for the benefit of the town and also something that developers won't kind of rally against. So there is a little bit of coming up with something that works, and I wouldn't want to rush something to just try to do it. I would want to get it right, and that's why I think it's going to take a little bit of time to figure out exactly what those numbers are.
Well, you've been working, from what I understand, you've been talking about it for over a year now. I don't understand the delay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
With all due respect, I'm not sure that that's quite accurate. We first of all would like to clearly get a sense of the board in terms of the direction that the board wishes to take with respect to affordable housing. I think this is a topic similar to some of the topics, opioids and other things that we've talked about that are more global in nature, and we want to get a sense of the board's perspective. The first meeting we had was back in May, where Valerie laid out the issues with respect to affordable housing. There was discussion about inclusionary zoning. She noted that has been discussion about this in the past. I don't think it has engendered a lot of support to this point, and I think it's appropriate that there be discussions with the development community as opposed to just proposing something and attempting to dictate it, because that's not likely to succeed.
Yeah. So can I follow up? Because I do think that when you propose something like, inclusionary housing on its own, people react, oh, well, somebody's going to build this in my neighborhood. And there's a level of concern some people will have with those sorts of proposals. Whereas if you tie it to, we're doing this because we have this limited resource, and if we don't do this, we will either use up our limited resource or we will end up in 40B where we won't have the choice. And so if you propose them as two separate things, the natural default for inclusionary housing for a lot of people, good, bad, or otherwise, is to say no, because they fear what that may mean because it seems unknown. So I think if you're able to combine the two, and perhaps the timing's wrong for both pieces, and they have to come together, and so that may be one answer, is that both pieces get delayed if it's not ready now. But if you're able to put them together and have it as a combined proposal, it becomes more of a logical proposal, as opposed to two things that sit independently, and you may end up getting no's to both. And then we're in a situation where we're out of control. We're not in control of what our own future is in that regard. So that's some of the logic for why I was saying it in that way. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your point is made, certainly, and well heard. I'm sorry, so, please, Terry, thank you. I'm sorry, I saw you stand in.
Hi, Terry Marciello, Director of Elderly Services, as I'll be speaking on that piece of it. When this discussion came up and became apparent to me, I'm not one that usually likes to speak out in public on certain issues, but I feel that this one is very extremely important. So at that time, I spoke with Valerie, and we decided to have her come speak to the commission and to several other elders at the senior center, and pretty much as to what she presented this evening. And the response was very good. There was a lot of very appropriate questions, a lot of very hard questions, but the overall consensus with the elders in that discussion was that they're very happy to see that something is finally coming around to be able for affordable housing. They feel as in a group, in discussing even further with different people, that 55 and older affordable housing is very much needed because people really want to be able to stay in their town. They want to stay in Wilmington. And I know you've all heard it. I mean, we've heard it also in the annual town meeting. The reason I think you're noticing that people aren't here this evening, nighttime, it's not a time for people to really go out and driving, that type of thing. But in front of me here, I have 95 signatures that said that they're very interested as to seeing town land being developed by a developer. And I think that really is, these signatures are not, saying sign this now. These were elders, the people of the commission speaking to their peers, our kitchen discussion, our class discussion, and actually have a commissioner here and a staff worker here due to the fact that, Laura Pickett, our case manager, always hears that this is a need. And I think, not to say that this is going to be done, but the fact that we can have a discussion on it, get people's perspective on it, and see that there could be a possibility of this happening, and the discussion that they're starting to understand that 10% also. This whole discussion that we're just having. I think it's really important that 55 and older start understanding that too, and how it has an effect on the town now and in our future, and that we have the choice. So I think it was really important as a department that I kind of speak the voice of the elders that see that this is something good. So, thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate your feedback on that. I welcome other audience commentary.
Again, my name is Artyom Lashak, 15 Beach Street. So I have a few questions. First, as I understand, in order to keep above 10%, we would have to have 60, 70 affordable houses. So as I understand, this new development should be not above 55, but not less than 70, is it right? The new development, if it go ahead, it should be not less than this number? Correct. Okay. Another question, I just want to understand a little bit more about 40B, the danger of it. Does it mean that a developer can just tear down a one-family house and build multi-family house in the same place? Is it correct? Okay. Okay, thank you.
I have a
Please,
question to Valerie. On the SHI units that are decreasing, on that 15-year restricted, you put down 54. Is that happening by 2020, all 54 units? Or is that staggered?
Well, it's a good question. It could happen all at once. So those units come off of the count as soon as they are resold. So someone whose 15 years expiring in 2020 could come in tomorrow, pay off their loan, and it's off the list. They will definitely be off the list by 2020, 2021, because after the 15 years, they just automatically come off. But at any point, they can come in and take it off of the list tomorrow. So sort of staggered, but maybe not.
So it's not, the full 54 units may not come off on 2020?
There could be a few left over, but most of the units are coming off before 2020. I've done the math to see if there's any way that I've done the maximum that can be on in 2020, and I've done the minimum number of units in 2020, and we're still below that 10%.
Anything else at this time? No?
So, another question, is affordable housing, is it subsidized by the town in any way or not? No, okay. And another question, so in order to be affordable, the 3-bedroom home should sell for $223,500. Is it all the type of houses included, like single family and
apartments, or just specifically some, all types of houses? And what happens if, so you mentioned that it should be going through the market. Does it mean that this price can fluctuate, or it will be firm by contract from the developer, this affordable price?
So the maximum that the developer can charge is that number. They could always charge less. And the way they do that is with certain state subsidies. But those numbers are set by the state, so they won't change. The numbers change by number of bedroom and by level of affordability. But that's the most, that's sort of a maximum.
Another question. So if we go ahead with this development of affordable housing, and what happens if the number of not affordable housing will unexpectedly increase by 2020? Are we planning to cover for that somehow, or it will be just, I'm just afraid that if we even go for that, we're just still on the line of this 10% somehow. Are we planning to restrict the new development somehow, or what's the plan for that?
So the numbers that I've provided in that sheet are accounting for about 40 or so units per year for the next couple years. And that's slightly above the average, so I think we've counted on a bit more than we're going to see, hopefully. It doesn't account for some sort of very large project coming in that's unexpected. It accounts for our normal development levels. And then the idea would be, once we create those number of units and provide a requirement for all projects going forward to add to the affordable numbers as they're being developed, so the inclusionary requirement. So we get back up to the 10%, and then we require developers to build affordable units when they're building any project. The idea would be to kind of stay at a level above 10%.
Thank you. Yep. I think one of the challenges that we find ourselves in at the moment is that because of the history that Valerie has talked about, where there has not been any significant adds or any adds to affordable housing of late, and we're seeing some affordable units fall off, we're in this somewhat unenviable position of having to have some kind of a sizable development that would be that would bring the number of units in as affordable so that we would catch up, so to speak, so that even if we took the action tomorrow of preparing an article for annual town meeting to include an inclusionary bylaw, that would perhaps allow us to tread water so that we're not further falling behind, depending upon what the composition of that inclusionary bylaw was. But that's not going to alleviate the problem that we're in, where we've had an expansion in the total number of homes in Wilmington, and we've not had the expansion in the affordable units. So at some point, whether we pursue some kind of a development through use of town land to leverage that and to encourage affordable housing, or whether we allow a 40B project to come forward, I don't personally see how else we're going to be able to catch up. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have. We either foster development, perhaps to some measure on our terms, or we allow a 40B project to come in, and perhaps, depending upon the developer, there's some opportunity to have some discussions, recognizing that ultimately they hold the cards in large measure, but there's certainly not to say that we couldn't have productive conversations with a developer who's looking to do a 40B project, I certainly would expect that we would take that course, but it just becomes more challenging because under the 40B process, as Valerie talked about, they can decide where to locate that project and how dense it's going to be, subject to a limited degree by the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. West, yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon again, gentlemen. I just have a few comments and questions. One, on the affordable units that are falling off the rolls, the town of Wilmington, I believe, has always had a first right of refusal on many of those. Am I correct? So that the town could actually purchase those and resell them. Am I correct in that?
No, these aren't being sold necessarily. They were homeowner loans, so rehab loans. So at the time, if someone made a certain level of income and they came in and applied for a rehab loan for their home, they could take out a loan subsidized by the town and the federal government to do work on their house. And in exchange, they would have a 15-year restriction put on the house. If they sold it before then, they would have to pay it back.
Right, but I believe, now, Shawshene Commons, I think, was an example. I think that the town had a first right of refusal on those units, correct?
Yes, on those they do. Those are not falling off. So the only ones that are falling off the list are the 15-year rehab loan units, which the state doesn't count those units, that program anymore. So the ownership units that are just deed restricted, we do have a first right of refusal, and those are not falling off the list.
Now, is the deed restriction in perpetuity? Okay, so even if, so the town wouldn't have, I guess what I'm saying is that if you have some units that have 30, say 30-year restrictions or 20-year restrictions, whatever, obviously those at some point in time will fall off the rolls. But if they're in, and I was thinking that if we have any of those type situations and the town has a first right of refusal, maybe the town could actually purchase those homes and resell them, on a lottery basis or however the town would seem fit. Again, that's not going to get us 80, 90 units, I get it, but again, I'm just trying to figure out ways to get the homes that are dropping off not to be dropped off.
Yeah, the only ones that'll drop off are the home rehab loan ones. The other ones, if they were approved through a different process, and they won't drop off our list. But we have talked about that idea as far as if the town ever comes into owning a home or something, we could, turn it around as an affordable home.
Right.
Yeah.
Another couple of things also, gentlemen, and Valerie certainly. I know sometimes, usually a town meeting every year, 2 years, you get into a situation where somebody might say, hey, I've got an R60, R4, R20 zoned lot, and I want to subdivide it because, my kid's getting married and I want them to be able to stay here in Wilmington. Maybe could there be some sort of restriction on that, yeah, if we give you the right to rezone because you're trying to, help out your family, maybe, and give them an affordable place to live, could there be a deed restriction on that type of property to make it affordable for other people in the future? So, we're giving, one kid a head start, and maybe in perpetuity we can give other families a head start. I don't know if that's something that's possible.
It's an interesting idea. Would that be part of this inclusionary kind of a language?
I'm not sure. We'd have to look into whether that's possible. I'm not sure that a zoning change, a vote for a zoning change could require something like that.
Okay. And what about spot lots that we have? I mean, again, I know you're looking, like one of the main things you're looking for here is the St. Dorothy's lot because it's large and you're trying to think, okay, we can get some big bang for the buck here. But are there other lots in town that the town of Wilmington, through the town manager, could deem as surplus and either work through, say, Habitat for Humanity, Shawshene Tech, a combination of those type resources to put a affordable house on the market? I know Shawshene Tech has built homes in the past, so I'm wondering if there's something like, along that end that, through the surplus land issue, not necessarily just St. Dorothy's land, but I know there's spot lots around that, we've decided for whatever reason that they're maybe not surplus, but could they be made surplus for this type of process, and I don't know what the count on that would be.
That is certainly something we've looked at. There are various lots that the town has come into ownership over the years for one reason or another, and could do these incremental one lot here, one lot there, which will certainly be helpful. It's not going to solve the issue of remaining at 10%, but that's certainly something that we are, is on the radar.
Okay. And in other developments, I know some developments we have something, for one reason or another, there is an affordability clause, and some developments there isn't. Is there a way to mandate that either A, like the other gentleman said, that we have some sort of an affordability component, or if for whatever reason the builder comes up and says, it really doesn't fit here for whatever reason, could there be some money that could be paid in lieu of an affordable housing component that, again, if we could add up that, maybe we could go purchase something, or at least there'd be some sort of an enterprise fund, revolving fund that we could have.
Most, well, I shouldn't say most. A lot of the inclusionary bylaws in other towns do have that. So, right, so there's a requirement that if you build, I'm just going to make up numbers, I think actually used 5, if you're going to build 5 homes, you have to make 1 affordable, just for an example. If for some reason, it doesn't fit in, or there's some sort of reason why it wouldn't work in that location, there usually is sort of a buyout option where you pay money into a fund instead of building the home. It's usually better to have the developer build the home because they build homes, and the town doesn't. But typically there is some sort of way of kind of working around hard situations where you can provide funds instead of the home. And those are the types of things that we'd want to work out in that requirement, some of the details we'd want to work out.
Again, I'm thinking that, something like that, you'd have money, and again, I get it that money doesn't go to, doesn't add an affordable component, but all of a sudden there could be another opportunity where the money could be used to either purchase a unit and sell it. I mean, we've done, we could do something like that possibly, just kind of thinking out of the box a little bit, other than just, selling town-owned land in a wholesale package here, which I kind of think the St. Dorothy's package being probably the largest piece that that the town is looking at this time. The other thing that I'm wondering, and maybe Terry could comment, I don't want to put her on the spot, but I know back in the early 2000s, like 2004, 5, 6, when I was on the board, and certainly Mr. McCoy was also, one of the things we had looked at was the possibility of using the Whitfield school site for a potential, like a Deming Way type affordable housing, because one thing you got to remember is that we talk about the average median price being, $469 and all this, but yourself, there's a lot of seniors out there that they don't own that, the McMansion. They own their basic house, and they're going to sell it for probably $350,000 or something like that, maybe. And they need a place to go too, and they're not at the age and stage that they can have a substantial mortgage and pay some sort of a condo fee. So I know, like, I went to the state, we had a couple of meetings down in Boston. Again, this is back in 2005-ish, and we were looking at the possibility of, I know the building inspector said, Greg Erickson at that time was looking at a 24-unit potential development at the Whitfield site, using like a what is it called, on-site septic type system, because there's no sewer in that area. But I'm just wondering if there's, because right now we have, I think it's 77 units, if I'm not mistaken, over at Deming Way. So I'm just thinking, is there a way to create that type of housing, which really, in my eyes, is affordable housing? I mean, we talk about median incomes and this, that, and the other. I mean, my 22-year-old daughter cannot afford the affordability guidelines in Wilmington. So I'm just thinking of ways, out-of-the-box type ways of thinking for, maybe like a Deming Way style expansion at another location. I don't know if is it fair to ask you, Terry, or is it? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I didn't know if that's something that.
Well, in our discussion, in our discussion about this, say for example, the property at St. Dorothy's, it wasn't going to be, from my understanding, it was going to be a questioning about apartments. So it's really not that they're actually buying something. That was one of the thoughts for this property. And I think that was the piece that people found very interesting. Of course, this is not, I mean, I don't think this one thing is going to give the answer to it all. I think what people really liked was that the town was seeing that there was choices for people. Whether the rent is a good choice for everybody, it's not going to be good for everybody. But like paying for their own condo, some people can't do that, but some people can. But I think really for my point, as in bringing up everyone's discussion, is that they are very happy to see that there are choices. So I really can't answer that piece of it. So, Valerie?
Again, Terry, not trying to put you on the spot on that, but I'm just thinking that, we have people in town that, like right now, there's usually a waiting list to get into Deming Way, and I'm just thinking of, a way to get people, into that type of environment, if that's something that's really affordable for those type of people, which...
Well, just in a general conversation, as in Deming Way, again, correct me if I'm wrong, in Deming Way was in speaking to Maureen Hickey, and just in general discussion, that was in the 80s, and the discussion of that type of senior state housing, they're not really seeing happening anytime soon.
Okay. You look like you were going to say something, Valerie. I'll put you on the spot.
Sure. No, I agree. In talking with Maureen, and other towns are in the same situation, right? They want more affordable housing for their seniors. We're not seeing state funds for any expansions of housing authority units. But what we can do is, with an RFP situation for a piece of town-owned land is, we have we can set a minimum, right? So the affordability is at a minimum 80%, but if you provide more affordability, if you go lower with your rent, maybe you score higher and you're more preferred as a development team. So we can kind of work out ways to have a preference for more affordability. But like Terry said, I don't know if it's going to be the right thing for everyone.
Okay. And the last thing I'll just mention, gentlemen, is that real quick is that there's an over 55 development, I think, being built over in the, was it Andover Ballardale Street area, or the Foster's Pond area. And we haven't really seen much about, what the price is and what all that is. So again, that might be something that you might want to look at. I know you're trying to make a decision for this town meeting, but if it turns out that either, irregardless of the vote here, one of the things you might want to look at is, how is that development coming and what are the prices? That's the main thing, is that what type of prices are they saying for over 55 people? So I just want, just to kind of put that in the component. And, on a personal note, I would prefer not to sell the St. Dorothy's land. We just bought it. We really haven't, you guys really haven't come up with a use for it. But again, we just bought it, so I know it's part of the whole scheme of what we're looking to do to improve the infrastructure of the town. So we might solve a 40B problem, but we may cause a town hall or municipal service problem. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Frank. Mr. McCoy.
I didn't know, if we can make a quick comment.
Of course.
I just want to talk about, the manager said about a half hour ago, and I'm going to agree with the manager, and I'm going to agree with Valerie Gingrich, relative to the inclusionary zone. I've got some issues with it. Being that said, I'm kind of glad to hear that we're not rushing some type of zoning for this annual town meeting and wait until annual town meeting of 2019. I'd be all ears to take a look to see what you folks come up with. Being that said, I just want to make that clear. So I'm really glad to hear that, because we only started talking about that since May of 2017. And I just want to talk a couple of quick other things. Relative, the whole idea of us being here is, are we going to sell off any town-owned property for affordable housing? And I'd just like to make a comment on that. And I understand the weather's not the best, but this thing was advertised fairly well. And forget about all the officials here. There's less than 15 people here. You could probably have this meeting in my 2001 Suburban with maybe me and Eddie not being in there. But anyway, what I was going to say was, to be totally honest, I've been involved in town for a long time, and I think one of our greatest natural resources is our town-owned property. I don't think we should be selling any of those town-owned properties. We had a public meeting not too long ago, and I know the weather was a little better, I'm gonna say that, but that was well publicized. We must have had, what, I don't know, 80 people or more relative to the construction of a 2-lane bridge at the Butters Road Bridge in that area. So I understand, you know, there's a concern out there, and if somebody has a better idea down the road, and I think I could, you know, grasp that, I'd be willing to look at it with all ear, you know, with open ears. So being that said, I just think, you know, right now this would be kind of premature. I know I'm one member, but I'm not going to vote tonight if we do take a vote to sell off town-owned property. I had no issue buying the Yentau's property off the bank. I know the town manager, former Mike Carr, did a good job negotiating that deal, and we voted it, and it was for a town use. And I know relative to the St. Dorothy's Church, I mean, God's not making any more property, so I didn't have an issue doing that, planning for our future. And I know this is our future when it comes to senior housing as well. But that's something I think we really need to take a look at. Being that said, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time, and I, you know, obviously like to make comment if I need to down the road. But just one thing, if I can, I think I was thinking writing down, maybe Selectman Kyra did say this when we were talking about the, and if you can help me, Valerie, relative to the affordable units, like you said that units that have been affordable for 15 years. What happens to those, and I was writing down notes, you probably answered it, what happens to those units after the 15 years with those folks that are living with them? They have to surrender that at a certain time, or do they become fair market value, or how does that work? And you may have already answered, I apologize, I thought maybe you did.
No, so what happens after the 15 years is that their loan is paid off. So it just automatically, they owe zero, and therefore the restriction is gone, so it falls off of our list. So nothing happens with the home physically or even ownership-wise. It's just that their loan is forgiven, and we can no longer count it as an affordable unit.
So whoever owns it at that particular time, they could sell it for fair market value, or they restricted to sell it at affordable?
They could sell it. They could sell it at any time for fair market value,
Sure.
If they pay the loan back. So it's a little different than, it's a different program than we're used to talking about, and that's why the state no longer counts those units at all. But they could, the unit was always fair market value as long as they paid their loan back.
All right, thank you, I appreciate that, thank you. That makes sense.
If I could, just to be clear, Mr. McCoy, you said one thing in your comments there, and just to sort of be granular, you mentioned that you wouldn't be inclined to vote tonight to sell town-owned land, and that's not the vote that I'm hoping we'll take. The vote will be whether or not to put an article on the town meeting to let the public, to let the residents decide to vote or not to vote. So tonight's vote is not whether or not to sell town-owned land. Tonight's vote is to put an article on the town meeting to let the public vote as to whether or not to sell town-owned land. So I just want to be real clear about what eventually, hopefully, if we do in fact take a vote, that would be what we'd be voting on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ma'am, please.
Robin Thedos, Clark Street. I have occasion to spend a lot of time at the senior center, and I don't claim to have a good pulse on it, but I do have some serious exposure to people's concern about this issue. I do not like the idea of selling town-owned land, but I am for this because of most of the people I've been talking to, they think it's a good use for this land. And I am absolutely dumbfounded that there is such a lack of showing. But I do understand, I myself did not want to come out. I was busy, and then I got comfortable, and shame on me. But it's nighttime, I don't like being out, it's difficult driving, and a lot of the seniors are my age or better, and I understand they're not here. I am sure you would have a much bigger turnout if it was day hours, and this weather is a handicap for driving at night for many. I encourage you to seriously consider putting it on the ballot, on the town meeting warrant, rather. Thank you. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Sir, I'm going to let this gentleman
Oh, yeah.
speak,
No,
just because you've had a couple of shots at it there, Mr. Newhouse. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael Newhouse, 439R Middlesex Ave. As I've listened to the discussion tonight, many things have gone through my mind, but really two things that I just thought would be worth standing and sharing with the board and encouraging the board to consider. And number one is that I don't believe that being proactive and working within the current 40B system is mutually exclusive. We're here this evening recognizing that through the 2010 census, we satisfied the town's requirements, and we really did that by working within the framework of 40B and without doing things such as what's being proposed now in the sale of town-owned property. So I think that it is certainly possible to be proactive. And I understand that 2020 is coming upon us fairly quickly, but I still think there's time to work with the private sector to provide the kind of housing that's needed in order to get us above the 10%. We've done it before. Historically, we've satisfied that requirement. And that is related to my other point. My other point is that when we talk about diversifying our housing stock, I think that's a distinct, albeit related issue to affordable housing. I think, from what I've heard in this room, and certainly a number of other public hearings that I've attended, people recognize that affordability in terms of 40B is not necessarily what is affordable to the average person or the average family in Wilmington. And while what's being considered, may go towards the satisfaction of affordability for the purposes of 40B, it really is not, I don't want to diminish the effect it would have on the diversity of our housing stock, but it's certainly only addressing one demographic of that. It's certainly not addressing keeping young Wilmington people in Wilmington, either as rent payers, as prospective homeowners with starter homes and the like. So I recognize that it's related, but I would encourage the board to distinguish between providing that diversity of housing for Wilmington residents and the affordability component of 40B. I just feel as though we've done it in the past, and I think if we're proactive and we work with private sector property owners and developers, there's still time really to identify an appropriate piece of property to help to formulate a plan that makes sense for residents. And I think in large part we've done that already when we've talked about some of these more dense housing developments and zoning creations. So I appreciate your consideration and your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newhouse. I see Mr. Michael Kara approaching the microphone, so sir, I will come back over. But
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen. Michael Kyra, 5 Fletcher Lane. I would, just a couple of quick comments to clarify some things. I know Selectman McCoy probably remembers that it was the CDBG program, and that might clarify the units that go off in 15 years. Those are the program you will recall that the town did through a grant where if somebody was at a particular income level, they could apply and then have some work done on their house, a new roof or something like that. So I guess, Valerie, the last were done in 2006 or 2007. Is that what you're basing the 15-year number on?
The last ones are expiring, I can't do math right now, the last ones are expiring in 2022, so yes.
Okay, so there's probably a few. So that 54 number might come down a little bit. And I'm not sure about the math. If the census begins in January of 2010 and it goes until the current date, then it's nearly 8 years that we're talking about if all of 2010 is covered. So we're probably looking, if we're doing it basically on math, then the number of units that are to be built would probably be about 55 to 60 more. So I think we may be a little high, but I won't even dispute that. I think the whole issue here is that we need to get enough affordable units to meet the 10% threshold. And I would argue, as Mr. Newhouse just mentioned, that there is another option that hasn't been mentioned, and that is the private sector option. I think this is a good meeting to give notice to developers that they have opportunities to come to the town with perhaps some proposals. We might have missed the boat a little bit in 2016 when the town submitted a new zoning district by not including an affordability component to that. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe we can offer an amendment to that particular zoning district for this coming meeting that allows us to move forward with an affordability component that would be in that particular zoning district. That's something that I think the town might want to consider. And then even if folks have already utilized that zoning district by making application to the town, we might be able to incentivize them in some way. The other point that I would make is that we really need to look at apartments, because that's what's going to get us over the threshold. It's all well and good, and the town has in the past. Buckingham is an example where we have located a few affordable houses, but that is not going to reach the 10% threshold, which I think is very important. I believe what is being asked is specific to the St. Dorothy's property, because that's what's coming up on the agenda as I read the agenda. And I would rise in opposition to that. I think Selectman McCoy makes the correct point. We're not making land anymore. This is all we have. We only need to look at the good decisions that folks made before us. At one time, people wanted to sell off the Boutwell School and the Glen Road School because there was no need for it anymore. Town Manager Stupczynski made a very good decision. He leased the Boutwell School to the Abundant Life folks. And then I was the one who had to bring it back online because we needed more room. We didn't have the kind of room that we thought we were going to have, apparently, when we leased it. But for the good sense of Mr. Stupczynski, he didn't give it away. The same was true about the town hall, the temporary town hall, which I think started in 1984, and we were going to be there just for a couple of years until we built a new town hall, and we're still there. Well, we were going to give that away, too. There was an effort early on when I was there that talked about selling off the Whitfield. There was talk about selling off where the public building is now. All of those discussions were had, but we were prudent and we realized that at some point we might need those areas, and each of those areas are being utilized. And so I would urge the selectmen to be very cautious, particularly now. I don't think that there's a great hurry. I think there are other options that we can try, particularly with the private sector, to see if there's anybody out there that we could work with. The other point I would make is I'm not sure if we still have money, but we established an affordable housing trust fund back in the early 90s, and so that might be there. And then there was a question that was asked by one gentleman as to whether or not the town would be subsidizing the housing. And you bet your life we'll be subsidizing the housing if we're going to provide a very valuable piece of real property. Then I think that's subsidizing the housing. So in my judgment, we need to retain the property because you never know when we're going to have a need for that property. You can see that the policy has always been acquisition when we've had an opportunity to acquire. If we didn't take the property on Wildwood Street for eminent domain, we wouldn't have a high school now because we needed that acreage to count for MSBA funding. And so now we have a nice field there. If we didn't buy the property at Yentall Farm that was so beautifully developed by the town manager and his staff, we would be missing a wonderful resource. Even something as small as the property that was next to the library that is now used as the bookstore next door and has been given awards by the Mass Municipal Association for its creativity and ingenuity. I mean, I think it's very important. I would much rather see the town in the business of acquiring property. I was, very, very disappointed to hear that there's discussion now about selling the Wildwood Street School. I mean, there's property that is so valuable to the town. We need to be thinking about space for cemeteries and for other things that might be coming up. So I think we need to maintain our inventory of town-owned land and look creatively with the private sector to see if they can't help us solve this particular problem. And the final point I would make is the word 40B should not, and at least in my experience, be looked at, as a four-letter word. We have some very good 40B projects. And I don't want to debate whether or not we have any influence on those, but we had influence on the ones that have come here. We worked very collaboratively with Avalon on those two projects, and I believe there was collaboration ultimately with Regency Place, as well as 10 Burlington. Probably the only project that there was not a good sense of collaboration was the very first project that no one is doing anymore, and that was Shawshene Commons, that unfortunately just kind of got away from folks. But I don't think that we can preclude the thought that we couldn't work collaboratively with a responsible developer. So I hope that you will take an action tonight that does not put this article on the town meeting warrant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr, and thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. Anybody else that hasn't spoken yet want to be heard this evening? I don't see anybody. Sir, you're welcome to the microphone.
So just two quick questions of fact. The 228 that have been built since 2010, how many of those were affordable? Do we know? Was it close to 10%?
None of them.
None of them. That's not good. And then the other one is,
I'm not sure if that's true. I would have to, yeah.
10 Burlington since 2010?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So that was a few.
So 25% of 100, about 25
About
maybe.
25. So about 10%, that's good.
25 units.
And then the other question is, do we know how many will come off between 2020 and 2030? Because that way we can plan. If it's half the list, then yes, we need to work with a private enterprise. Yes, we need to have an inclusive zoning, and yes, we need to do housing for the seniors. It might be all of the above, depending on what the numbers are for the next 10 years.
Once the 15-year units expire, I don't anticipate others coming off because typically there are deed restrictions in place, and they're not just 15-year restrictions. There's always a chance that something could happen and something could become not affordable, but typically the state still recognizes that on our list, even if something strange happens. So hopefully things won't keep falling off. So it's a matter of getting back up to the 10% and certainly open to developers who are watching this who want to build affordable units. Please come and talk to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank
10
you.
Burlington Ave, I thought all 104 counted against the 10% because it's a rental.
So out of the
Valerie, is
200,
that accurate?
so out of the 228, 104,
No,
I think it was
there's
108. I would have to look back.
They're rentals, so they should all count towards the affordable number. That's what I recollect when we approved that.
Yeah, I'll have to
100%.
look at those numbers to make sure that something seems off there, though, because
I remember the law change, we were going through that. At the very first part of the 10 Burlington Ave discussions, there was a delay because of ownership, and then a plan finally came in front of us. And I remember that they were gonna put 15 or 18 condos along that side street right there. That came right off. And because it was a 40B, 10 Burlington Ave, I'm pretty sure that it's all, I think there's 104 apartments there.
I think it's 108.
Might be 108.
I think it's 108.
Are accounted towards our 10%.
Yes. And so, yeah, that was built in, what was it, 2000?
10?
Was it 10?
9?
I would have to check the date on that
Yeah.
to really know what side of the 2010 it's on, but.
And those 108 are never coming off the number.
Correct. Correct.
And there was 25% of those apartments were for affordable.
Right, so 25% of the apartments are restricted as affordable, but because it's a rental project, all of the units count towards the 10%.
And just to let everyone know, a 40B, when a 40B comes into town, they could do 20% if they wanted to. And the town's been able to negotiate, I think all of them. I don't know about Regency, but I know a couple of them are at 25%. Jocks Lane, Burlington Ave, and Salem Street are all at a minimum of 25%. So, thank you.
Yep. I think we definitely need to check that 228. That's striking to me if we're saying now the prospect exists that of that 228, 104 or 108 were affordable. I can't believe that we've only constructed 114 units here in the last 7 years. I mean, I think we need to check that number, but my understanding was that 228 was separate and distinct from 1 Burlington.
Ma'am?
Robin Theodos again. This is town-owned land, and we all have our own opinions. Some agree, some don't. But it's town-owned land. Why don't we let the town vote on it, what they want to do? They can say no. Let the majority rule. So I encourage you to put it to the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank?
Sorry, real quick, what I was thinking, kind of thinking out of the box. I want to thank Mr. Kyra for his speech and Mr. Newhouse as far as, working with private developers. One of the other thing I was thinking of is that this grant that we had received back in 2000 or whatever year it was, could the town use free cash? And again, I get it that it's not free, and I get it that, I get the components of free cash, but I'm just thinking that if the town could take, say, an allotted amount of money, say, I don't know, whatever it is, that's for you and the finance committee to determine. But if we set up a similar type program, we could get affordable units again. Am I correct? So that the town could loan out, as they did back, as Valerie was saying, money for roof repairs, septic repairs, et cetera, and put a deed restriction on those properties, say a 15-year deed restriction. Why not? It wouldn't necessarily cost us any money, because what we'd be doing is taking the money from free cash, loaning it out, and we'd be getting it back possibly with interest. I'm just kind of thinking out of the box here.
It certainly would cost us money. It would cost us the money that we have in free cash, but I'll defer to Valerie on this, but I'm not sure that those kinds of loan rehab programs would even qualify to be deemed affordable, so to speak. And I think the affordable issue, I think the focus needs to be on creating housing that people can afford to purchase. I'm not sure necessarily, and I suspect maybe this is why they took that off the list, loaning someone funds, with all due respect to folks that may be struggling to repair or replace a roof, isn't necessarily addressing at least one of the major elements of affordable housing, which is the ability for folks on various, whether it's the first-time home buyer or the elder who's trying to downsize. That type of program really doesn't help them
have the wherewithal to make that purchase.
Right, so the 15-year restriction, they no longer do those. So they don't count, DHCD, the state doesn't count the home rehab program restrictions as part of our affordable numbers anymore.
Okay, but maybe, and again, just say this real quick, is that maybe you could look at what types of programs do qualify for the affordability guidelines, and maybe there's a way we could implement some of those within the town government. And again, I don't want to say, I'm not saying to drain free cash, but even if, just for argument's sake, you took a couple of $100,000 out of free cash, put it into an enterprise fund that people are paying back. And if they're not paying back, we have the deed on the house. So I mean, just kind of thinking out of the box, and it might get us some units. I'm just thinking along those lines. Thank you.
Anyone else from the audience? Well, thank you. Oh, I do see someone.
Hi, good evening. So I'm late. John Wallace, 73 Clark Street. Same as Rob and Theodore, so I'm commissioned on for the elderly. And like Terry said, there's been a lot of talk by the elderly about the housing. And they would like it put on the warrant so that they can come down, the town has a chance to vote either up or down on the issue. I'd just like to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, well, very well. Thank you again, those of you, all of you who are here for coming down and participating in this process. Appreciate it very much. Opportunity now is really, I think, ours to make our case to each other to some degree. So I'm not going to, just because I'm the guy talking, I'm not going to dominate. So Ed, I see your hand went up. You're first.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I was for selling town-owned property for the development, but I've changed my mind because of the discussions that we've had over the last couple of months, mainly because what Mr. Newhouse said and Mr. Kyra said that, and they're absolutely right, and I've said this at every meeting that we've had this discussion, it's only really helping one part of the problem that we have, and that's the over 55, which I know there's a major issue. But I've got a 24-year-old son that's dying to buy a house, and all his friends are moving out of town. It doesn't address that at all. The other thing that what Valerie has said tonight, it's going to add about 70 units to our affordability stock, and that's barely getting us to 10%. And that doesn't include any, and that's based on roughly 40 houses a year. So maybe that number's conservative, maybe it's not. So I have concerns about selling town-owned property for development right at this moment.
Thank you, Ed. Mr. McClay, you
I think I made my position clear, and however you want to handle it, if you are willing to make a motion at the time, I'll leave it to you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's just make sure everyone has a voice they heard here. Yeah, I'm sorry, go right ahead, Greg.
Thank you. Valerie, thanks for your presentation. Very thorough and appreciate it. No, this is a couple times now you've been before us, so it's certainly not an easy task and certainly no easy answer to this problem, so I appreciate your efforts here. With that said, I think back to a previous meeting where you were there and you mentioned some of the numbers from other communities. I find it hard to ignore the fact that we're one of the only communities in the area you mentioned that has town-owned land. I'm really proud of that. I think a lot of us are proud of that. We've made a sincere effort to acquire some town-owned land, and I think that's a good thing. I'm also conscious of the fact that you brought the numbers to us recently that majority of the towns in this area that abut our community are already below 10%. We're one of the few that are above 10%. So certainly this isn't a challenge that's unique to Wilmington. I think we all agree there. I think this is a premature move here for us. I too am opposed to selling off the town-owned land. I'm very proud of the town-owned land that we have. I think it's a great resource for our community. I'm also sensitive to the fact of the voters who just in 2013 voted 197-9 to acquire that property at St. Dorothy's that we talk about tonight for $1.7 million. And so I'm conscious of that vote that was just recently taken in 2013. I also have concerns about the projections that you outlined for us tonight. You mentioned that we're at 10.4 now. You project us to be at 10.1 as of today. And then somehow in 2 years, we're going to go down to 9.4. So I just think that it'd be premature to jump on something like this right now. I think we should lean on our partners in the private development and also through zoning. I think we can achieve what we all ultimately hope to do, which is have some affordable housing, not only for seniors, but for young folks that Mr. Loud mentioned. And, you know, I'm proud to be one of those younger people who grew up here and worked hard and tried to save their money to be able to stay here. And it's not easy. I do acknowledge that. But I want to make sure we can continue to have more folks be able to stay here as well. I agree with the comments that were made by quite a few people now that town-owned land isn't popping up and that we just only have a few of it left, and we ought to value what we have in case of something down the line. And so I appreciate the proactive approach, but I do believe this is a little premature at this time. In 2019, things could be different, and certainly I'd be open to reassess the situation there, but at this time I'd be opposed to selling off any of our very valuable town-owned land.
Thank you, Greg. Mr. Carr, do you have anything you want to offer or questions?
No, my stance has been pretty even keel and the same right along throughout the process of Valerie's presentations, and I just don't believe at this point in time we have the surplus land to sell. And I think we ought to keep what we have and maybe moving forward with private developers, working closely with them, or maybe in 2019 we revisit. But at this point in time, I think I would not consider selling any town-owned land.
Thank you. Well, I guess that leaves it to me. And I find myself in the incredibly unenviable position of being the only one to differ with all of you. And to also differ with my good friend and mentor, Mr. Kyra, and Mr. Newhouse, whose opinions I value tremendously, and whose experience among yours as well, I also value greatly. So it is not it is with some hesitation that I ever take an opposite position to such an austere group of individuals. So. You know, I guess I heard a number of folks, you know, a number of you guys, my colleagues, talk about not being in favor of selling town-owned land. And I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure where I am on the issue of selling this particular tract of land. I don't love the idea, for certain, for all of the reasons that you folks indicated. But I am still in favor of giving the attendees at town meeting the opportunity to hear the case that was made today. And giving the attendees at that town meeting an opportunity to get educated and to have their voice heard. We heard Terry bring us a number of signatures that represented the audience that she serves, and we have the vote from a couple of town meetings ago. The attendees at that town meeting clearly indicated that there was a desire for the town to take an active role in developing a plan to accommodate senior housing. Recognizing that you know, accommodating senior housing doesn't answer the continuing question of how do we accommodate or appeal to that young audience that we want to, I guess, find a way for our kids to try to you know, start their families and start their residences here, maybe through apartments or a diverse housing stock. So I think there's a lot of moving parts that should be happening all at the same time. But I'm really speaking specifically to this idea in my mind of killing two birds with one stone, sort of, really accommodating the idea of meeting the 40B requirement on our terms rather than being sort of having it thrust upon us. At the same time, accommodating our senior citizens or the over 55, sorry, I don't want to group over 55 in, but really accommodating that more senior audience with residential opportunities for them that are affordable by the state's standards and consistent with if the facilities master plan, which talks about using town hall in the future as a new senior center, then we have, obviously there's proximity and advantages associated with that. The issue of the fact that it is indeed town-owned land and that the voters did a couple of years ago vote to acquire that property, they acquired the property as an asset, as something for the town to put in its back pocket and use for some later date for some purpose as yet undetermined. I would argue, and not to be argumentative, but I would make the case that this is the purpose. This could be conceived or perceived, and the case could be made that this is an appropriate purpose for the use of that land, and that for all of the reasons I cited a few moments ago. So, the town purchased that land, and I believe that this is an appropriate need or appropriate use of it. So, I could probably go on, but I think that summarizes my view on this. At the end, my view is I believe that we could continue to educate and be educated ourselves as to what the opportunities are between now, November, and April, when we have May? When's town meeting? May 5th, thank you. And so lots more information could become available, but having an article on the warrant for that town meeting would afford the opportunity to the attendees and the residents to have their voice heard on this matter. So I only advocate tonight that we give the people the opportunity to vote rather than us sort of thwarting that opportunity for them. So that's my position on it. I guess we are probably, I'm sorry, ma'am, you have the opportunity to speak as well.
Gail Protopappas, Pilling Road, Wilmington. My question is, or statement is that it comes to a time that our senior citizens, like myself, our homes are getting to the point we can't keep them up. Now, where do we go? If you can't supply the housing, we'd have to go somewhere else. And we don't want to. We want to stay in Wilmington. Well, that's my statement.
Thank you, ma'am. I feel like we had a setup there. That was kind of good. We worked together. I appreciate those sentiments. So, yeah, please go ahead, Greg.
If I could make just one more point, maybe it's a question to Valerie. Even if this project was to be voted in by the residents, we can't guarantee that all these units would go to Wilmington residents. Is that correct? Someone from out of town could say, oh, that's an attractive unit. I'd like to downsize there. I live in Tewksbury. I live in Billerica. Is that correct?
So what you're allowed to do is you can have a 2/3 local preference. So 2/3 of the units would be reserved for Wilmington residents at the start, and that's what you're allowed to do.
Yeah, I just want to mention it hadn't been talked about, so it's just one of the things I want to make sure we're clear to folks that it's not guaranteed that all these are going to go to Wilmington people. So 2/3, I think it's worth pointing out.
It's worth pointing out at the start is the operative words there, because it's not 2/3 to the Wilmington residents. It's just at the start. So if they're not filled, then it's going to go to outside individuals, Billerica, Tewksbury, whoever.
Okay. Well, I think we've all had an opportunity to talk. I don't know if, Mr. McCoy, you seemed poised to make a motion, but I'm not sure where you were going with that, or if you still feel like you want to do so.
I'd offer this motion. I move that the Board of Selectmen direct the town manager not to prepare an article for the 2018 annual town meeting to sell any town land property relative to affordable housing. I'll just say it clearly right where it states there.
So, I'm sorry, so Mr. McCoy.
Mr. Chairman, it's under our board to consider already.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, what are you saying, Ed? We're jumping ahead?
I'm just saying that under number 7 on our agenda, board to consider authorizing preparation annual town meeting articles to sell town-owned land known as 120 Main Street, lots 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 to develop affordable housing.
So
there's a motion
to not do that. Your motion is to not not do what you just read. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Well, the motion is any town-owned land.
In general, any town-owned property. I'd make a motion that we direct the town manager not to prepare any article for the upcoming 2018 annual town meeting for the purpose of selling any town-owned property. That's it.
I'll second it.
So I'll accept that motion and the second for discussion. I don't see any. My only discussion is, I guess, just that historically, working with you gentlemen, which has always been a pleasure, we have generally, I think we've generally erred on the side of giving the opportunity to the voters to have their voice heard. And I don't think there would have been danger in doing that. So I guess I'm disappointed that we don't have the opportunity to put this before the body.
Mr.
Yes, please.
Just a point of order.
Go right ahead.
I just want to be clear. I think we should be clear to the residents. Residents, any resident can still have an article to be voted on. We're not eliminating the possibility of anyone can bring an article to town meeting if they meet the criteria. So we're not eliminating the possibility of residents having their voice heard. I just want to be clear on that.
No, I appreciate that. That's a astute observation that I hadn't made, so I appreciate you making that. But enough said on my point, anyway.
I just want to clarify the reason why I'm voting in opposition is it's an over 55 development. Doesn't get us, we're not 100% clear that it's going to get us to the 10% or above by 2020. And there are bright minds and bright people that have been here tonight in other meetings, and there is other parcels of land that this town hasn't even looked at to possibly put over 55 development. And Whitfield was mentioned. There are a lot of sites that have not been looked at. Off of Salem Street, the town owns a ton of land up off of Salem Street. I'm told it's all wetlands, but I don't see a lake out there, so I don't understand that theory. So there's a lot of opportunities for this town to develop over 55, and more so affordable apartment, more so affordable housing for not just the 55 development. What about the young kids? I'm going to stress that until we start talking about that also, because there is one 55 development across from the street where I live that was very unsuccessful for 8 or 9 years until a new developer came in and bought it and sold those condos from no one from Wilmington that I saw, because I read every one of the sellings, for $379,000, $410,000, $425,000. And now there's one being built up off of Andover Street, and I'm going to be watching that to see who and how affordable those are, because there is a need for over 55, but 120 Main Street is not in my purview right now as an option. Maybe in the future, but not right now.
Well, just to clarify, Ed, if I may, the properties that you referred to, while they were deeded as over 55, they weren't deeded as affordable, correct? The one, is it Whispering? Is that what you're talking
Whispering
about?
Pine has 25% affordable.
It does have 25%, forgive me.
And
Okay.
at the time, the developer had to come back to the Board of Appeals to change that, because he was at 30%, and then he went down to 25%, and then after he went down to 25%, hey, I'm really not selling these, can I have 2 apartments in each building not be over 55? And the Board of Appeals went with it.
I remember.
So we have to build true affordable housing and/or apartments for the over 55.
Mr. Chair.
And those aren't affordable.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's all I'm saying.
Just a moment, sir, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll yield to the gentleman.
All right, well.
So I'm concerned by 2 things I've just heard. One, you took a boulder to kill an ant. The whole discussion here was on one property, and your proposal is to suggest to the town manager not make any proposals, which is not what was discussed. So I don't understand your motion at all, Mr. McCoy. And the second thing is, all of you have spent several hours talking about how much land, or how little land we have, and then you just brought up how much land we do have. So please be more consistent. Either we have a lot of land, and there's plenty to choose from, and I don't understand why we've had this meeting at all, or we don't have the land, and I understand the meeting. But your motion makes no sense, and you've just contradicted everything that's been said here. So I'm very concerned with both of you.
What I'm saying is, We haven't had discussions about other town-owned property for over 55 housing. And there are other pieces of property that the town owns. That's what I'm saying right now. Okay. That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Bendel?
One other observation that I'd like to point out is that it hasn't been talked about here tonight, but it bears repeating, it's been talked about at several other meetings, is that, Valerie, the numbers that you're giving us here tonight, they don't include projects that are, say, in the works right now, right? There are several developments. Mr. Loud mentioned the one on Andover Street. There are several others that have been approved at recent town meetings that doesn't include, right? So there are some developments that are being in the process of being built or being approved to be built, and that we're not including in these numbers, these projections. Is that correct?
No, we've accounted for projects that have, so in the total number of housing units, is that what you're referring to? No, those projects are what's producing the 40 per year. So we've got a bunch of different subdivisions going on. So those projects, as they continue to build units every year, are the 30 to 40 units per year. So they have been accounted for.
So the town is aware of every private enterprise that's going to be taking place over the next couple of years?
Certainly not. But what we've seen as an average since 2010 is 28 units per year. And there were a few years, I know you guys noticed that there were a few years where the number of units were a little bit lower. So the concern was that maybe that's too high. We've actually taken an uptick. So now we're more on, target for 30-some units this year. So I think an average of 40 per year for the next 2 years is our average-ish, but certainly it doesn't account for, a very large project coming in or some sort of variation from the norm.
Right. I guess that's my point. We can't predict what someone in the private sector is going to do with their property that they own up until this point, right? So, and again, I don't want to come off as, I'm opposed to a solution for our seniors. It's that I'm opposed to this at this time. I believe that this isn't the solution. I think there are other solutions that we could look at to achieve that goal, which I think we all have that same goal.
Very well. So we have a motion made, and I believe it was seconded, yes? Because we're in discussion. Discussion has been going on. I don't want to thwart it if there's more to be said, but I don't see any more. So I would say all in favor of Mr. McCoy's motion. Motion by saying aye. I have 4 for it, and against is me. So it does not, I'm sorry, I guess the motion does pass, and so no instructions will be provided to Mr. Hull to craft an article for town meeting relative to the sale of town-owned land.
For 2018.
I'm sorry?
For the town meeting in 2018.
Did I not say that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay, well, it's implied. Very well. Thank you all for your involvement in that conversation. And
make a last comment, even though it's all done?
yeah, please, Terry.
In the sense that I understand your points of view, everyone have a great point of view for all of this, but as you can see, there has been a discussion. And I don't think the discussion, whether it be the property where it is, but I think the discussion of senior housing has to still be discussed, whether it happens now, whether it happens a year from now. Every year, at one point in our annual town meeting, senior housing is brought up. It cannot be ignored. At the same time, I understand about kids. I have 2 kids of my own that are trying to be in this town. But it's so aggravating that this town would not be what we have today without the seniors that have also made it. And I think we need to really look and work on this as not to just dismiss it right now, that it really needs to be looked at. So sorry, I just needed to make that point.
Thank you, Terry.
Terry, I understand what you're saying, but about 45 minutes ago, you're talking about senior housing 55 and over. We should really have a true debate on what's true affordable senior housing. Maybe somebody that's on a fixed income, Social Security. We're not mentioning that. But with all fairness, for you to make that comment to say we're not doing nothing, you're specifically saying over 55. I'm over 55. I can go buy a unit.
Michael, I did not say that. What I said was, at this point, it is an issue that cannot be dismissed, That at this point, yes, maybe there is an issue about that land, but it is a discussion that needs to still be discussed. That was my point.
You said over 55.
Thank you, Terry. Very well. I guess we will move on into our communications portion of the program. Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
First, under communications, we have a memo from Mike Morris, who is just advising the board about his recommendation to me to hire the firm Roselli Clark and Associates as our auditing firm. They have been performing that service for a number of years. We did go through a request for quotes. Their price came in the lowest of the three firms that submitted quotes.
I know we have a board to consider coming up later related to that. Do you think it's prudent to take that up now, or do you want to just go through the communications and take it up when it comes?
This isn't something that the board needs to vote on.
Forgive me. Go right ahead.
Next is correspondence from Textron. I'll just read it into the record. During the next several months, reductions in force will be occurring at Textron Systems Corporation, DBA Textron Systems Weapon and Sensory Systems at the company's site at 201 Lowell Street, Wilmington. There are approximately 51 employees currently expected to be affected at the site. The first separation from employment is expected to occur December 31, 2017 and continue through June 30, 2018. We expect the separations to be permanent. There are no union representatives, and there are no bumping rights.
Disappointing.
We have correspondence from Paul Looney. The original correspondence was referencing work that was being done on the Butters Row Bridge. It was slated to be completed by November 10th this year. Subsequent to that, the end of this past week, there was additional an email correspondence from Mass DOT advising that due to some structural issues that were not initially foreseen, there's been a delay in the ability to complete that work. They're now looking at Friday, December 8th as the date to complete the work on the Butters Row Bridge. Next is a memo from me to the board just announcing, as per the requirements under the open meeting law, certain executive session minutes that have been approved by the Board of Selectmen and also voted for release. And the specific meeting dates for these minutes are February 25, 2013, May 13, 2013, June 10, 2013, June 24, 2013, October 9, 2013, November 25, 2013, April 14, 2014, and May 12, 2014. Next, we have correspondence from Valerie Gingrich with regard to the affordable housing, which has already been discussed. I don't know that there's any need to really review that again. We also have a memo from Valerie Gingrich with regard to a recommendation for acceptance of donation of land on Ballardvale Street. This is specifically map 98, parcel 8. It's being offered to the town, 20,473 square feet. Parcel is located right on Ballardvale, and Route 93 also borders it, as does some town-owned land. It's largely wet. The Conservation Commission did vote to adopt it, or to accept it at their November 1st meeting. It will serve to some measure as an area for stormwater retention. It doesn't have any building value per se. And so I would recommend that the board vote to accept this donation of town land, this donation of land.
So that was one that has a board to consider coming up So I think it probably is prudent to take that out of order. So I would accept a motion to accept this donation of land.
So moved. Seconded.
Motion's made by Mr. Bendel and seconded by Mr. Loud. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you for the donation of land.
Next was a memo from Denise Casey with regard to Comcast Cable. The board has already addressed that. We have a memo from me to the board with regard to recommendations involving event requests that will impact road closures. I can either take that up in detail now, or that's also a board to consider.
Why don't you jump into it? It doesn't make sense to double back on it.
So as you recall, there was a process that I proposed about a month and a half ago in an effort to try to anticipate, more fully anticipate some of the events that come up throughout the year where local groups are looking to use have races or walks or events that essentially may impact town budgets. And so it was, the board agreed to the process. Notice was sent out to these various groups, and there's now a list of a number of groups here that are seeking permission to have their events. Most of them are for fiscal 19, which would be after July 1 of 2018, but there are a couple have made requests for the current fiscal year as well. So the list includes the Wilmington Little League. They're looking to have their annual parade May 21, 2018 at 8 a.m. And also they're looking to have the same event on May 20, 2019, again starting at 8 a.m. We're One Wilmington, they're looking to have a race walk on April 21st, 2019, beginning at 10 a.m. Pan Mass Challenge, should say Pan Mass Challenge, Kids Bike Ride, they're looking to have that event on 5/19/2019. It's 7 a.m. start. The Brady Foundation is looking to have a 5K run walk 6/10/2018, beginning at 8 a.m., and then also the same event in 2019, June 9, 2019 at 8 a.m. July 4th committee is put in a request to close Middlesex Ave, a portion of it from essentially the School Street to Church Street, July 1, 2018, and July 2, 2018. Wilmington Tewksbury Chamber of Commerce is looking to have their half marathon 5K September 16, 2018, beginning at 10 a.m. The Tony A 5K, 5K run walk, they're looking for either October 6th or October 7th, 2018, beginning at 9 a.m. And then finally, the Soul Sisters Running Club is requesting to access all these 5K running routes are the same, by the way. 5K run walk, 12/1/2018, 10 a.m.
So you're looking for us to approve all of those for those dates. Is that accurate?
Yes, what I would suggest is that the board take them up separately in those cases where, for example, these run walks, most of them with the exception of the half marathon, they're also looking for access to the town common for setup and so on. So in those particular events, it would be authorization for the event as well as use of the common. Wilmington Little League, obviously there's just a parade route. Pan Mass Challenge takes place over at Carter Lane, so those are separate locations.
So you want to go down the list and take a vote for each? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I would suggest, yes.
Okay. So there you go, gentlemen. I suppose we could probably do the Little League.
To grant the request for the Little League.
For both of them? Can we do both
of them.
18 and 19?
Second.
It's made and seconded. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Where One Wilmington,
Move to grant the request.
made
Second?
and seconded. Any further discussion? None? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. The Pan Mass Challenge on 5/19 of 2019.
Make a motion to grant the request.
That's made and seconded. Discussion? None? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Brady Foundation twice, 6/10 of 2018 and 6/9 of 2019.
Make a motion to grant the request for Brady Foundation for both dates.
Second.
Made and seconded. Discussion? None? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Wilmington Tewksbury Chamber of Commerce Half Marathon, 9/16 of 2018.
You saw 4th of July.
Did I skip 4th of July? My check mark was too big, sorry. 4th of July Committee, fun on the 4th, 7/1 and 7/2 of 2018. Forgive me.
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. Now, Wilmington Tewksbury Chamber, 9/16 to 2018.
Make a motion to grant permission to use. Second.
Made and seconded. Discussion. All in
Just
favor?
a
I'm
quick-
sorry, please.
Just a quick question on these two here for September and October. On that Sunday, is there any, mentioned, Jeff, that they're going off from the common? Is the farmer's market there at that particular time? Just for conflicts,
For which ones, September and October?
September and October, yeah.
They will be, they're typically operating on the Sunday. The 16th, I believe, was the date that the half marathon run-walk took place this year, and there was no conflict there.
I might also offer that the Wilmington Tewksbury Chamber Half Marathon doesn't go that route. It starts actually at
Right.
Waltham Street and ends there. I'm sorry, so forgive me, guys, I wasn't keeping track. Do we have a motion for the Wilmington Tewksbury Chamber? We have that motion made
Second.
and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous, very well. The Tony A 5K on 10/6 or 10/7.
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. And lastly, Soul Sisters on 12/1/2018.
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. Very well. Thank you. I want to give props or compliments to all of the organizations. This was a new process for all of them, and it seems like they were pretty responsive to
Yeah,
it
they
in a short order, so
Yeah.
that's good.
Next is just a memo. It was actually directed to me from Karen Campbell with regard to the Town Beach non-resident fee policy. And she makes a number of different points in here. I'll just summarize essentially. It's a follow-up from the meeting of October 23rd. She recaps the discussion from that point. Notes that the changes were first made in 2014 due to complaints received from beachgoers and neighbors in the area about parking, noise, trash activities, and believes that the changes that have been made, including the fee structure, have generally been well received by residents both in the neighborhood and out. Notes that there were 2,300 passes issued in 2013. And then she posed a series of questions, which I won't go through, but was looking for some, any comments that board members might have. And then again, notes that it's her understanding the Recreation Commission's mission is really to be serving Wilmington residents, and points out that the residents, even though they are not being charged a fee, essentially part of their tax bill covers the maintenance and operation, whereas non-residents, in the absence of a fee, aren't really making any contribution to the beach maintenance.
So is there an action? Karen's asking for ongoing, I guess, feedback or input. I think the night that she made the presentation to the Board of Selectmen, I wasn't here, and I think Mr. McCoy, maybe we were both a little bit late getting into the meeting, and Mr. Kyra very adeptly managed the conversation. But nevertheless, I guess, I'm not sure if Karen's expecting any kind of a formal discussion on this, or really just an encouragement that each member share observations or thoughts with her as they have them.
Well, I think the sense I have from the board is that there's a desire to change the policy. I think there perhaps should be a further discussion at a upcoming meeting before we before we know it, we'll be into the new beach season. It's clearly our recommendation, quite honestly, that we keep the system the same. I know that there's always going to be aggrieved parties that feel that they, should have access to the beach at no charge. We're trying to manage it the best we can and minimize the deficits.
So I'm sorry, you're suggesting that we
I think that we probably ought to revisit this at a subsequent meeting, and if the board is some direction to do otherwise, then we would certainly want to have that.
I'm sorry, I thought I saw her hand, or someone was going to make a comment. So a future agenda item is your suggestion there?
Yes.
Is there opposition to that notion by any chance? I'm just wondering if everyone's on board. Very well.
Next is a memo from George Hooper. This is with regard to a complaint we received with regard to the water cooler unit that's at the town hall outside of the auditorium in terms of its cleanliness, and there's a question about water quality. This took place back on September 26th. The water samples were taken on the 27th, sent to the MWRA for testing, and the various tests all came back within range. Chlorine, pH levels, iron, manganese, turbidity, all were within the acceptable ranges as prescribed by the Mass DEP. There's a memo from me to the board with regard to New England Transrail. This is referencing correspondence that they provided to us indicating that the final scope of study for the environmental impact statement regarding NET has been completed. You may recall that the town issued comments back about a year ago on the draft scope of study. At this point, the initial draft was essentially a template. The current final scope of study is really the specific issues that will be raised with regard to the NET proposal. At this stage, there will be an environmental consultant that will be working for the Surface Transportation Board, paid for by NET, that will be addressing the various issues in that scope of service. And given the fact that it took a year to get to this point, my expectation is we'll probably see that draft environmental impact statement in about a year, and then we'll have an opportunity, as other interested parties will, to comment on that impact statement that, in my estimation, will certainly have an effect on that project going forward.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Jeff, this card that we got in the back of this, I know other residents got that, but some didn't. Did that go to the whole town? Do you know?
No, I don't think so. I think there may have been at one of the meetings, if you attended a meeting and signed in, I think it probably went to, it could have gone to you as a member of the Board of Selectmen, or to the extent others participated in the meeting, they may have been on the list.
Well, I didn't get one personally from home. I got it in my packet, but my brother-in-law asked why he got one. And he
Yeah, I
was
don't
just
know
curious.
unless he was at a meeting that
Yeah,
he
he might have
signed in
been.
and was on a list.
Thank you.
Then the other piece of correspondence is really part of that. It was the letter from NET describing what I just outlined to the board. We have next a memo from the police chief, just noting, and I'll actually read this, on October 12, 2017, the Wilmington Police Department received reaccreditation from the Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission. The efforts of the entire department deserve recognition in receiving the award. Special honors should go to our accreditation manager, Lieutenant Daniel Murray, as well as the entire command staff for their tireless work in preparing for our assessment, which took place in May of this year. I attribute our success in this program to the cultural professionalism we collectively embrace at the WPD, which is in keeping with our core value of commitment, compassion, and respect. I would just note that this is something that is that many communities do not receive. It's one of those exceptional efforts. So certainly good work for the police department.
Yeah, it's regrettable. I think the chief just excused himself from the room, and I wish he was in the room at this moment, because I certainly would like to extend congratulations to him and the entire staff. So I guess I'd do so publicly now.
Next is correspondence, again, from the police chief, referencing their Santa Run. This is an event that the police department does in conjunction with the fire department, and the event takes place between 8:30 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. on December 9th, and they will have various stops along their route. Families are encouraged to come and with their kids and meet Santa and make donations to Toys for Tots, the food pantry, or perhaps write a letter to military personnel. The schedule of the actual locations will be, as soon as that's provided, we'll get that up on our website. We've got correspondence. This is a memo from me to the board with regard to correspondence from Tennessee Gas about their pipeline maintenance program. You'll recall at a prior meeting I advised the board that part of a long-term project that they have a series of pipeline routes that run across the state, but this one in particular runs from Linfield through Reading into Wilmington and then beyond, and they need to make sure that that corridor is cleared because they survey the status of that corridor via aerial, and so they are now in Wilmington, and basically describes the process they use for notifying residents. The residents who are in the impacted zone, if you will receive correspondence in advance of the work, and then they'll be followed up with a representative from Tennessee Gas that will be going door to door. This effort is expected to go through December, and there's a phone number for a representative at Tennessee Gas. If people are interested in contacting this John Prohl, 603-294-6073, Monday to Friday. Next is a memo from Mike Woods. This is just to make sure that the board is aware of a plan to replace the Nassau Ave water storage tank. There was, the first intent was to try to have the tank repainted, and when it was evaluated, there was concerns about, as part of the process, obviously there's scraping that needs to be done, and the outfit that looked at the work couldn't guarantee that it, in doing that work, the integrity of the rivets and all would be preserved. So what we're looking at now is replacing the tank. It will be approximately $2.3 million, and this will come out of the water fund, so it'll be not a raise and appropriate from the town. The engineering work is ongoing. The construction is expected to start at the beginning of the next fiscal year. The current tank was built in the 1920s, so the new tank would be built alongside the existing one, and then once that tank is online and the existing cellular towers are removed from the old unit, then that would be dismantled. And then I have finally the memo from Mike Woods. I had asked him to just provide the board with a status and update on the efforts with respect to the Entile Farm Recreation Facility. You'll recall there was some discussion about additional components being added to the facility there, and this addresses those work being done there. The police cameras, actually, I believe today, in fact, there's a firm out there looking to make the connections on the cameras. The call box, the fire department, that's been installed and is operational, so that's an emergency call box if someone needs assistance. Public buildings, there was a request there to provide a particular type of vacuum to allow for cleanup of the concession building, which has been purchased and being used. Recreation, there were benches, 4 6-foot benches and 2 8-foot-long picnic tables that have been purchased and installed. Health Department is recommending automatic defibrillators, which have been purchased. And then Public Works, there's a couple of units there, a vehicle, a Gator utility vehicle and groomer for the turf field, which have been purchased. And that is under...
We've done, thank you, Jeff. I think we've done all the board to considers, with the only exception being to sign the warrant for the special town meeting, which would be held on Saturday, December 16th. So certainly we have an example or a copy of the warrant as it exists right now. So I'd accept a motion to that effect.
Mr. Chairman, could I just
of course
make a comment, if you don't mind? I understand it says we're having it in the high school auditorium, and I'm just wondering, Jeff, if you can tell us, I believe this is going to be well attended. I really think we should probably have this in the gymnasium. I'm just wondering if we did have it in this room, what's the maximum seats? And then we did talk about something, I believe, I know in the past, I don't know if it's ever been utilized, the cafeteria. How many seats are in the cafeteria and how many seats would be here? And I assume we're going to have to need an assistant moderator. If it fills this capacity, I believe it will.
Well, I know there's in excess of 600 seats here. I would really prefer to have it here as opposed to having it in the gym. As you know, when we've had town meetings in the old gym, we'd have it taped down, and there's a fair amount of effort that has to go into getting that set up and ordering chairs and all of that time and expense. I think if we have it here in the auditorium, we can look at the possibility of having an overflow area. In talking with George Hooper, the suggestion was made to use the cafeteria because there's a screen out there. It's my understanding that everything that's broadcast in here could be picked up out there. So I would prefer to do that.
I just wanted to ballpark. If it did have the overflow, how many seats would accommodate residents in the cafeteria if it did have a screen? I'm just trying to get an idea.
I don't know offhand.
I could estimate, Mike, it's all I could offer, but I think the cafeteria comfortably right now with the tables the way they're set up probably sits, 120, 100-ish. That's what I'm guessing at.
I just think there's going to be a lot of folks here. I really truly believe that. Whatever the pleasure of the board is, for my money, I think we should have it in the gymnasium.
Your opinion is heard. I don't know if anyone else wants to compliment that, or?
No, I'd prefer to stay away from the gymnasium. I just wouldn't want to ruin the floor, and as Jeff mentioned, all the expense if we have to rent out chairs. I'm sure that there are classrooms that are available. The large conference room we were in tonight,
Right.
the executive meeting, that accommodated about 70 people, or maybe even more. So I think there's plenty of room around without having to use
certainly there is out here.
All right.
I'm just confused. Last week, Mike, you said it was gonna be an hour meeting. Now it's gonna be thousands of people here. So I don't see why we shouldn't have it here in the auditorium.
Well, I have to trust the manager. If he says we can have seats in the cafeteria, and then obviously in the other room, the audio room, I believe the school committee meets, so,
Yeah.
I mean, you're probably talking another 200 to 300, so, it'd be about, I'm not gonna, look into a crystal ball. I can't, I'm not Nostradamus. I just think we're gonna have a lot of people there, but, all right, very good. I think we're on our way. Auditorium.
Thanks for that discussion. We are still in a position to make a motion to approve the warrant. Okay, crickets.
I'll make a motion that we approve the warrant as indicated from the special town meeting as written here, presented before the board.
I'll second it for discussion. So we have a motion made and seconded by me. Discussion mode. Anyone have any commentary about not necessarily about the articles, I think that probably has been had, but just about this process, or?
No, just a quick question. It's a random draw. Is that
Yes.
the way this will proceed?
Right.
Through the moderator?
That's right.
Okay.
Any other discussion? So we do have a made motion by Mr. McCoy, seconded by me. All in favor of approving this warrant for the special town meeting as printed? It is unanimous. We are closed with the scheduled business of the evening, if I'm not mistaken. So we're under public comments at the moment. You are invited for public comments. I see none. Very well. New business or items not reasonably anticipated by me, the chairman, within 48 hours advance of the meeting. Jeff, did you have something you wanted to offer here?
I did. Wanted to mention that at the end of last week, I received a contact from Scott Garant noting that the tree lighting is coming up December 2nd, and that Larry Cushing, Mr. Cushing, has offered to provide 2 or 3 kiddie rides that could be set up at the same time the other events are going on. It would be no charge. The rides would be set up and operational roughly from 4 to 7, which is about the time of the events that are going on over there. I suggested rather than using the town common, that the Swain Green be more appropriate. We just finished the replacing the sidewalks in the section of the common there, and I just want to try to keep that in good shape. That he was amenable to that. The only thing that I would plan on doing, if the board is so inclined to authorize this, is we would send out letters to the neighbors in that immediate area. So right across from the Swain Green, there's 3 homes on Middlesex that run from the Swain down to Adams Street, and then the homes on School Street from Middlesex up to the senior center, just to let them know that this is happening. And it's, I think it's pretty low key. Like I say, it's kiddie rides. I think they were talking about a train and a merry-go-round or something. And the plan would be that the setup would take place Saturday, the day of the event. So, but it would be after 8 o'clock in the morning, and then the takedown would happen on Sunday sometime after 8 a.m.
So you don't need a vote from us, really?
No, I just wanted to make the board aware of it, and that was the plan.
I personally feel like it's prudent to send off a quick note to those residents that you identified, just to let them know that this is happening. But personally, I'm of the mind that this is low impact to the area, and it will, I think, enhance the overall celebration of the evening, and it's just for a couple hours. So I would be willing to say thank you to Mr. Cushing for offering it. don't know if there's any other observations on that. Very well. So I guess I will offer up the opportunity for anyone to speak. Greg, please go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two quick things. I want to give a big thanks to our Veteran Service Office. Did a terrific job, once again, honoring our veterans and our service members this past Saturday on Veterans Day, the annual Veterans Day ceremony. It was well attended despite the cold weather, and it was, again, a terrific event. A big shout out to the band. Those kids did an awesome job as well, as usual. It's like Mr. Shampoo likes to say, the best band in the land. I couldn't agree more. And lastly, I just want to wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving, a happy and healthy Thanksgiving to everybody out there, and to my colleagues.
Thank you, Greg.
I just agree with Mr. Bendel, what he just said. Veterans Day was just a solemn occasion, and Lou did a wonderful job. Everybody who participated in it, it was truly a memorable day. And I want to also wish everybody a happy and fun Thanksgiving. It's one of the best holidays that you can have. You just eat, you watch a little football, then you eat a little more. So that's a good holiday.
Here, here. Greg, you stole my best band in the landline. I was going there, but that's all right. I love listening to them. I have selfish reasons, but they are the best band in the land, bar none. And indeed, Thanksgiving is upon us, so for sure. Everyone, please enjoy, be safe, and I guess keep perspective on the world by spending time with people that you love and that love you. So I was going to say something else, but no, that's fine. So, Mr. McCoy, anything from you?
I'm good, just go Wildcats.
That's what I was going to say.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I agree with all my colleagues. First, I wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and spend time with your family. I certainly enjoy the eating part of it, and sleeping and then eating and then watching some football, so be safe out there. But my veteran shout out tonight is to John Wallace. He's a Vietnam veteran from Wilmington who volunteers at the Senior Center and has for many, many years. He helps out the Veterans Office when Lou needs help, and he delivers Meals on the Wheels to the Wilmington seniors. So, Mr. Wallace, thank you for your service and all your volunteers. Thank you. I also like to welcome the 3 new police officers that started this past week. They went through the academy and they started this past week, and I wish them a long and healthy and safe career in Wilmington. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Jeff, I'll ask you to go review our important dates, please.
So we have curbside collection of yard waste through November 25th. Brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's on the 15th. November 18th, brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. November 18th, Shawshene Tech Craft Fair, 100 Cook Street, Billerica, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. November 22nd, brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. November 23rd, Thanksgiving Day, the town office is closed. November 24th, the town office is closed, obviously with the exception of public safety. November 25th, brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. November 27th is the next Board of Selectmen's meeting, Town Hall, Room 9, 7 p.m. November 27th, also as part of that meeting, is going to be a discussion of local property tax policy with reference to classification for fiscal year 2018, that should be. Board of Selectmen meeting, Town Hall, Room 9. November 30th, Finance Committee / Planning Board joint public hearing and special town meeting. So that will be the next major forum for discussion about the upcoming special town meeting. December 2nd is the Christmas tree lighting, Town Common, 4 p.m. December 2nd and 3rd is the Festival of Trees at Villanova Hall. December 3rd, Breakfast with Santa, Knights of Columbus Hall, 8:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. 2 sittings, and that's sponsored by the Sons of Italy. The December 3rd is Holiday Social, Harnden Tavern, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. December 7th, Santa's Workshop, Town Hall, Room 9, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. As noted earlier, also on the 9th is the Santa Run, which is sponsored by the police and fire, 8:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. December 11th, the next Board of Selectmen's meeting, Town Hall, Room 9. And then December 16th is the special town meeting at the high school auditorium, beginning at 10:30 a.m.
Unless there's anything else, I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion made and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you all and good evening.